меня с чужеземной проклятой ордой. Туркестанцы сквозь грустное время шли под знаменем Ленина в бой. Забытые штурмы, не рейды, красных конников в знойных песках и панфиловцев подвиг бессмертный от подмосковных глубоких снегах. Отчистый верный часовой, всегда на страже разносторонний туркестанский округ боевой. В огне рожденный и закаленный, отчистый верный часовой, всегда на страже разносторонний туркестанский боевой.
Hello everyone. Let me know if that's too loud. That might be too loud. How's everyone doing? Cool. Okay, so that's better noise, I hope. I always mess up with the microphone, even though it's like way far away from me. Okay. Okay. Cool. How's everyone doing? So I stumbled on this video by Andrewism today. Still peeking. Oh my god. Maybe if I just lower the gain all the way and then I raise the volume all the way, that might be better, or is that too quiet? Alright, so yeah. I stumbled on a video by Andrewism today that I wanted to respond to. It's not about, anti-left unity or whatever. Anarchists and statists are fundamentally opposed in many ways. And his video was criticizing states, and there's plenty to criticize about states, but I didn't get far in the video. And I was thinking, I'm gonna make a video in response to this, but then I was like, this actually might be fun to react to on stream. And if it goes well, we might do this more often. Live react. And then after, I might then make a video on it. But yeah, the video in question is called "Why States Fail Humanity." And I watched about 5 minutes into the video, and I immediately saw just like a bunch of things that were like not accurate, not true, or not necessarily not true, but very myopic and very limited in what they were trying to argue. And so, yeah, isn't Alexander Avelis like the liberal who said to vote for Kamala or something? So yeah, I wrote a few notes. I wrote and did a few notes and stuff for like the first 5 minutes. But after that, I haven't seen anything else. And if it gets boring for a while and he doesn't say anything else objectionable, I might move on. But there's some big things early on that I really want to address. And it's like, and if you go into the comments of this video too, people love this video. They're like, oh my god, there's guys who said they were Marxists and Trotskyists and all that who got convinced by this video. But I'm going to show you guys how this kind of video, at least from the little I saw, is very, very myopic and limited, and how anarchism, in my opinion, is myopic and limited. Yeah. So, okay. Wait, no way. Are you kidding me? Andrewism goes on Robert Evans' podcast? That's perfect. I love that. Robert Evans, I made a video sort of about him a while back. Robert Evans is the perfect personification of the Fed anarchist. The anarchist that is an anarchist, but also like happens to support the destruction of Libya and or the destruction of Syria because it's run by dictators and all that stuff. Yeah, so that's really funny though to hear that Andrewism goes on Robert Evans' podcast. Okay. All right. I'm terrible at the streaming stuff, so I don't know how to transition into the video, but we're gonna watch the video. So we're just gonna do that. All right. Okay. Here we go, baby. Let's go. Let's go. All right. I'm hyped. Oh wait, I have to turn on this. Sorry, all good, all good.
Our world exists at the mercy of states. It is carved up by their borders, scarred by their conflicts,
True.
gutted by their extraction,
True.
and diseased by their waste.
True.
The people of our world are divided between rulers and ruled, and distracted by further divisions of their state's dictates.
True.
This was not always so, and it doesn't have to continue to be so.
True.
While states have existed in various forms for the past 5,000 years, they only rose and took their modern form to dominate nearly every square kilometer of this earth in the last 500 years.
True.
All I could say is, look how they massacred my planet. Our planet. When people recognize the failures of the status quo, some blame boomers or some shadowy cabal, but at least the radically inclined usually attribute the blame for the state of affairs squarely on the shoulders of the capitalists,
True.
and by extension, the capitalist state.
True.
Anarchists, on the other hand, see that the source of our people and planet's exploitation goes much deeper than the economic system. We instead find the source of...
I mean, the economic system is like what everything's built on. That is everything is the economic system, but okay.
exploitation, and thus the target of our opposition in the principle of hierarchical power, which manifests in capitalism, yes, but also in every permutation of statecraft, former systems like feudalism and chattel slavery, and enduring institutions and ideologies like patriarchy, colonialism, and more. I will go deeper into what hierarchical power means later on, but for now, I must express that I believe it bears responsibility for every abuse, every tyranny, and every deprivation of people's powers, drives, and consciousness. The anarchist Peter Gellerloos observed that anarchists have been accused for over 100 years of both romanticism and radical cynicism. The former,
Anarchists, yes, anarchists, I think they're a mixture of both, but especially romanticism. I mean, if there's any word to define an anarchist, it is romanticism. But the word I would use more specifically is idealism, which means, of course, that their ideas and their beliefs don't correspond to material reality, and they don't want it or try to make their beliefs correspond to material reality. They operate on terms of what could be rather than what is. And what could be is good, but they operate in terms of getting to a destination without... They see like an ideal and they think like we can just have that. But they don't reckon enough with material reality, and we're going to see that later on in this video.
insisting that humanity's base condition is total freedom, and that even now we can create societies free of hierarchical institutions and live on the basis of mutual aid, solidarity, and voluntary association, and the latter for maintaining that all forms of government, from the most dictatorial to the most democratic, are fundamentally oppressive, and that capitalism can produce no more than misery. Whether I look locally at our corrupt, condescending, and cruelly purposeless party politics...
I mean, it's just, capitalism is awful, but produce no more than misery. It's just one of those statements that anarchists make that are so sweeping and broad and total. Louis Althusser talks about the ideological state apparatus. And we have social democracies that provide free healthcare, they provide housing, they provide, transportation. it's ridiculous that to say capitalism can produce no more than misery. It's just not true. That's not. There are many places on Earth where capitalism can and does only produce misery, but especially in the social democracies, actually people have pretty damn good lives, but they still participate in imperialism. They participate in the gains of imperialism from the third world. They profit off of that. So it does produce more than misery, and that's not a materialist or effective criticism of capitalism at all. He's doing these total criticism. It produces no more than misery, period. No, it doesn't. That's not a good critique of capitalism. That's not a materialist critique of capitalism. And that doesn't teach anyone anything about how capitalism works. That's not how you criticize capitalism. But here's the next part that really set me off.
Misery. Whether I look locally at our corrupt, condescending, and cruelly purposeless party politics, or regionally at the various punitive, profiteering, and pitiful post-colonial regimes that populate the Americas.
Okay.
At the various punitive, profiteering, and pitiful post-colonial regimes that populate the Americas.
The punitive, profiteering, and pitiful post-colonial regimes that populate the Americas. Okay. So yes, there was this era called the decolonial era, where a lot of the colonies around the world were liberated from their colonialism, except yes, they weren't really fully eliminated. There's still economic colonialism in these countries. You have the IMF and the World Bank, and then you still just have the US coming in and cooing these countries and putting in the governments they want. So yes, the legacy of colonialism still exists in many ways. The better word is imperialism. But profiteering. So he has this camera, and he has the camera going right over, Cuba. You see Venezuela, Nicaragua. These are all leftist governments that, well, actually, every single country in this picture had leftist politicians. What happened, Andrewism? What made them into profiteering and pitiful regimes, Andrewism? Who did that, Andrewism? Was that just the states? They were just so evil and corrupt that they just naturally became that way? If you go on, he doesn't say anything about who made these states what they are. He doesn't say why Guatemala has a right-wing government, or Honduras, or Haiti. Why Haiti's a shithole? Why the Dominican Republic is a shithole? Why Puerto Rico is pretty bad? Why Jamaica is pretty bad? He doesn't say any of that. He just says the pitiful post-colonial regimes. The best country by far in the Americas is Cuba. Cuba and every country that fought against the U.S. in the decolonial era was the USSR. The Soviet Union was the country that protected these states, and they didn't do perfect. They didn't ever always do everything right. But if you look at every single indicator about a state like Cuba, it is far better than every other state in that geographical area. Ecologically, socially, in terms of what's granted to the people. So, and what makes this especially ironic? Okay, so it's easier to write scripts because my brain is just like, it just endlessly goes words and words. So, what we can also see in this map is Chiapas. I'm pretty sure, at least, because I think that's the Lacandan jungle. I'm not perfect on Mexican geography. So, there's a place in Chiapas called the Zapatistas. Now, the Zapatistas are basically totally anarchist in many ways. They don't call themselves anarchists or whatever. They're anarchists, okay? They are. They're as close to anarchist as anything that exists, especially at that scale. They're organized into like thousands of councils, and there isn't like a body that overrules. Like everyone has to agree on things. They're functionally anarchist, okay? Now, people don't understand you know, the Zapatistas, they are, I respect their struggle and I respect what they did to stand up to the Mexican state. And what they did was admirable. To revolt against the neoliberal reforms, to revolt against NAFTA, all of that is great. However, what people don't know about the Zapatistas and Chiapas is that it's fucking not successful. It's really not successful. And I've done my own research on this, and they are really not doing good, especially right now. Like, compared to Cuba, Cuba is completely devoid of crime, almost. It's famously devoid of crime. There's no gun crime, there's almost no crime. Chiapas right now is in the middle of a huge, like, conflagration drug war. It has been since the Zapatistas have existed. It is so bad that the Zapatistas have told people not to come to Chiapas, because these are not anti-Zapatista articles, by the way. They actually kind of... But there's very good data for this. I mean, look at the number of violent events. Like, Chiapas is in utter chaos right now because no one trusts the government. No one trusts the corrupt Mexican government. But the Zapatistas can't do anything. They can't defend against this. They don't have the military ability. They are not an effective defensive force against the drug lords and the traffickers. They can't do anything. So what about the pitiful post-colonial Zapatistas, Andrewism? But I'm not done when talking about the Zapatistas. They also let me see. Chiapas, the Zapatistas have been around for about 40 years, right? Chiapas still has the lowest literacy rate in all of Mexico. I don't know if I said Cuba being devoid of crime. I didn't say it was devoid. I didn't mean to say that. It is the least crime-ridden country in the Caribbean. Let me pull it up. Cuban crime. Cuba is considered one of the safest countries in Latin America. The country is practically free from organized crime, and serious crimes like robberies are practically non-existent. Cuba has low crime rates compared to many other countries in the region. Violent crime is rare. Okay, apparently it says here that the crime rate is soaring. But from everything else I've read, Cuba is extremely safe. Maybe it's getting less safe. That sucks. Best of luck to them. But I sincerely doubt it's as dangerous as Chiapas is. As I said, the Chiapas is so dangerous right now that the Zapatistas have told people not to come to Chiapas. Let me see if I can find that article. Don't come to Chiapas, Zapatistas. You can go to Cuba and, you know, not be under threat. Okay, come on. Fucking Bing. Okay. Oh my god, I've read this article multiple times. Okay. So yeah. But, again, Chiapas is in the middle of a huge gang war. But yeah, I mean, compare this to the Soviet Union, which industrialized Russia from a complete, you know, hellhole to a huge success, a huge economy to the point that they were literally in space, right? Chiapas, meanwhile, is Mexico's poorest state. Still, nearly 70% live in poverty. Now, I'm talking about this in a video I was going to make on the Zapatistas. 70% poverty rate is insane. That is extremely high. That is African levels. Worst poverty rates in the world. Now, again, poverty rate is a weird indicator. It's kind of really bad, especially the extreme poverty rate. But okay, so let's look here. World population review. 10 countries with the highest poverty rate, right? South Sudan, 82%. Equatorial Guinea, 76%. Madagascar. Okay, are you ready? Let's go back to the Chiapas poverty rate. Okay. Okay, so there's differing statistics then, because one place it says 70%, another place it says 60%, another place it says 40%. Dude, Bing is like literally plotting against me. Okay. Okay. See here it says 75% from Harvard. So I don't know why there's differing analyses. This is from 2015. When is this from? Statista? Yeah, that's less reliable, I would say. But that's from 2024. Okay. No, I was right. It cut extreme, this stupid auto result up here cut extreme and moderate poverty in half. So the actual poverty rate is 74%. Okay? So I stand vindicated, all right? So what is the worst poverty rate in the world? 82%. South Sudan. So Chiapas alone. And is this, I assume this is an extreme poverty. Is this poverty rate or extreme poverty rate? I think this might just be, let's see. No, because this is 40%. Yeah. See, yeah, less than $10 a day. Okay, so that is not the extreme poverty rate. That's just the poverty rate. So Chiapas, the poverty in Chiapas is the third highest. Yes, the machine learning search result excerpts are super unreliable because that result came up and that totally like threw me for a loop, but that wasn't an accurate result. So don't trust that AI bullshit. That totally threw me for a loop. So if we see here, South Sudan, 82% poverty rate, worst in the world. Chiapas, 74% poverty rate. What the fuck? What the fuck? I thought Zapatistas were like the based anti-colonial super cool anarchists. I mean, I guess they are, but they've had 40 years. They've had 40 years. And their country is, their county compared to the world average is the second worst in the world. Do you guys like understand what this means? Like, what a disastrous failure this is? This is disastrous. Like, this is like the closest to a real anarchist, like, system. And they're completely inept. I mean, compare this to the Soviet Union, where everyone knows and there's extensive economic proof that the Soviet Union had the most incredible industrialization in human history. They went from a third world country to a spacefaring power, the first spacefaring power. Chiapas has the second highest poverty rate in the world compared to countries. I mean, do I have to keep going? I mean, he calls Cuba a pitiful, profiteering post-colonial regime. Do I even have to keep going? Like, I think I win. Like, this is embarrassing. This is extremely embarrassing. And I'm doing this, and I'm being so hard about this because Andrewism has blown up. You know, he's popular. He's got 200K subs. People love him. You have Marxists and socialists in the comments saying man, you changed my perspective on things. You changed how I see the world. And it's like, to be fair, comparing Chiapas to the USSR is not fair. No, okay, people saying on the chat, you're not being accurate, because guess what? The Bolsheviks started as a small amount of people. The Bolsheviks started as a small people. The movement spread. This is inaccurate. The movement spread. It became popular. It spread. They won the Russian Civil War. They won the Russian Civil War. They took over the entirety of Russia. They fought off 14 invading powers, and then they became a spacefaring power. And again, this is an anarchist criticizing these states. I mean, I think you can compare, because how else can we compare anarchist and statist movements? I think it's an extremely anti-materialist and just kind of dismissive to just not be willing. Okay, so people in the chat are pushing back in this, and they're totally missing. The point of the Zapatistas that it's supposed to be a local entity to the region of Chiapas, unlike the USSR. Okay, Nostal 6. So why do they have some of the worst poverty rates in the world? Why do they have the worst literacy rate in Mexico? I don't know if I discussed that yet. Also, Zapatistas are pretty progressive socially, but let's see if this is accurate. Let's see. Okay, so here's the Mexican analysis of the economy. Although they might be a little bit untrustworthy because they might want to make the Zapatistas look bad. The literacy rate for Chiapas, the literacy rate was 13.6%. And I know this is the lowest in Mexico, and I'm trying to find it. I didn't say it was literacy. I meant to say it was illiteracy. Oh, okay. No, Chiapas' illiteracy rate is not 80%. It's 16.2%, but it's still the worst in Mexico. So Russia has much more resources. It was industrialized to some extent, bigger population. I don't know. I feel like having a 74% literacy rate is pretty bad. Yes, he was referring to Cuba when he said profiteering, because he was referring to all states, and in that specific quote, he was referring specifically to Central America. That's Andrewism's whole point, is that all states are profiteering, pitiful. Well, maybe not pitiful for like America. But if we compare an anarchist project to Cuba, we can see, oh, by the way, Cuba has the highest literacy rate in the Americas too. Let's see. Cuba literacy rate, I think it's 100%. 99.67%. So and then the Chiapas literacy rate is Okay, I hate these auto results. I absolutely hate these auto results, man. I want the literacy rate, not the illiteracy rate. Yeah, okay, so if we see here, where does this cite? Chiapas is dead last. It's improved. No, this isn't showing an over time, but it's dead last. It's dead last. People are saying like, oh, they don't have resources. If the project was Russia was invaded by numerous countries. The Bolsheviks were invaded by numerous countries. The Bolsheviks were invaded by the Nazis. They fought these enemies off. They grew. The Zapatistas haven't grown. They haven't educated people. And again, the reason I'm being polemical here is because Andrewism starts his video off by saying the pitiful post-colonial profiteering states. And it's like, yeah. Russia is too far to compare with any of Latin. Okay, I'm talking about Cuba. Compare it to Cuba. I won't mention the Soviet Union again compared to the Zapatistas, all right? Compare it to Cuba. Compare it to Cuba. It's no match. It's a miserable match. It's absolutely miserable. Yes, in Cuba, if you say shit a little bit too much, they might put you in prison. But you'd have to go pretty far to do that. But yeah, they'll put you in prison. But guess what? Cuba has huge issues. It's not great in a lot of ways. But guess what? Incredibly clean. Well, okay, the cities are dirty, but the environment is very clean. They're very environmentally friendly. I can bring that up too. I know that's Soviet ecology. Nope. Yeah. Okay. Cuba's importance as Cuba is the biological superpower of the Caribbean. It's not just the biological superpower of the Caribbean just because. It is the biological superpower of the Caribbean because of the policies of Cuba, environmentalist policies of Cuba. Oh, I brought that up in the wrong tab. My mistake. Hold on. Here. Cuba is the biological superpower of the Caribbean. There's plenty of sources you can read on this. It has incredible... My dad... I don't want to dox myself or anything, but my dad is an environmentalist. He went to Cuba. He was extremely impressed by what Cuba is doing with its environment. And then he was banned from going to Cuba because Bill Clinton was doing some fuckery shit. Yeah. So, in comparison to the Zapatistas, yeah, they've been taking care of the environment too, but... You should... Guys, I'm no longer comparing it to the Soviet Union. You don't have to tell me that. I'm comparing it to Cuba, okay? Stop going to the Soviet Union and compare it to Cuba. Cuba wins overwhelmingly in crime, in education, in healthcare as well. Let's look up, what is it? Healthcare in Chiapas, I guess. So, I know that the Zapatistas, in principle, reject Mexican healthcare, Mexican welfare. I don't know about healthcare, but welfare. They don't take Mexican welfare. But yeah, so it's not a competition. I mean, education, Cuba wins. Healthcare, Cuba wins. Social policies. I mean, if you saw the illiteracy thing, more women can't read than men. So, but Chiapas actually has a higher literacy rate Cuba has a higher literacy rate, I believe, among women than men. But yeah, let's look up Chiapas literacy again. I had a Wikipedia page. Oh, but this is the big thing too, guys. This is even bigger, and I didn't realize the number was that big. The indigenous people, which is what the Zapatistas actually control, okay? The Zapatistas don't control the cities. They don't control the cities. They aren't liked. Not that they're not liked, but they're just not successful in the cities. They control the small towns, the rural towns. That's where people are illiterate. People in the cities are literate, more likely, in the larger towns. The indigenous people, which is what the Zapatistas are heavily made up of, those are where all the illiteracy is. Those are where people can't read. Where the Zapatistas control. So the actual Zapatista literacy rate is actually way higher. Because the Zapatistas, they don't control any cities. They're just literally in the fucking jungle with indigenous people. And the indigenous people can't read. They didn't teach them to read. Because you can't teach people to read under anarchism. You just let them live their lives, and if they don't want to read, you don't teach them to read, even if it fucks them. So this Andrewism guy, these anarchists, they don't do the research. They don't look into these things. A lot of Marxists don't either. A lot of socialists don't either. Too busy or whatever. But I did the research. The Zapatistas are embarrassing in a lot of ways. They are not doing good. Compared to Cuba, okay? Let's say that. Compared to Cuba, okay? You can't be like a right-winger in Cuba. Yeah. You can't be an open right-winger in Cuba. What a fucking, or you can't be an anarchist in Cuba either, okay? Fine, let's say that. You're an anarchist in Cuba, you want to destroy the state, yeah, they'll imprison you. But you have healthcare, you can read, you can write. Oh, man. So, yeah. I'm glad I've at least partially convinced you, Adrenaline Van. But yeah, it's just, I get so passionate about this because it's like, I'm not an expert on Chiapas. I've done maybe 5-6 hours of research. But, I mean, if you just do 5-6 hours of research, it's kind of embarrassing. Their stats. You gotta look at the stats. You gotta look at the numbers. You gotta look at the percentages. You gotta look at what you have. You gotta look at the material, what they've actually done. And when you materially compare Chiapas to Cuba, not the Soviet Union, to Cuba, I don't know about Nicaragua. Venezuela has kind of been messed up in a lot of ways. Nicolas Maduro hasn't done a great job. Nicolas Maduro has made a lot of mistakes, but Cuba has done a very good job given the circumstances. But yeah, these countries are pitiful profiteering regimes because the U.S. couped and killed anyone who was a leftist. I never said the Zapatistas weren't good environmental-wise, by the way, Nastal. I never said that. Never said that. I was just saying that the Cubans also have very good environmental policies. So, I mean, I really don't know if I even need to go on. Because if Andrewism just did the research, if you just watched this video, if anarchists just watched this video, where I point to numbers, where I point to stats, where I point to facts, would that change anything? I don't know. But, also right here, Chiapas has an adolescent pregnancy rate above 70% of the average distribution, which is the highest in Mexico. I didn't even know that. So also there's a bunch of kids getting impregnated in Chiapas too. So, but that's indigenous culture, I guess, to impregnate kids. So you can't stop them because anarchism. You got to let them not read, and you got to let them impregnate their kids. That's anarchism. Crime, You know, some good environment, a bunch of pregnant kids, drug lords running the cities. No one can read. This is anarchism, dude. This is actually existing anarchism. Like, I read an article by a person who was very sympathetic to the Zapatistas, but was basically like, yeah, like, there's things are not going like an anarchist, like, great. So these are this web. Oh my god, I forgot the Mexican economy website. It's so well made. It's so well made. It's so it's so like just like very nice looking. But I feel like, you know, it might not be perfectly trustworthy, but yeah. Like, imagine if the US government had a, like, look at this. This is crazy. Like, this is probably very accurate information, given just, like, how in-depth it is, like, but, employment and education. So, yeah, I think I might be ready to move on, even though we're only 3 minutes into the video. We're only 3 minutes in, and I'm doing like what Hassan does, where he just talks for 20 minutes about a single thing. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything important. Probably am, but okay. Oh yeah, the average income for a worker in Mexico is 2.5 times greater than Chiapas. The two next poorest states are 25% and 30% above Chiapas. So workers, which anarchists claim to care about, you know, the anarchists are the ones that claim to really care about the workers, you know? You know, the Soviet Union didn't care about the workers, they oppressed the workers. The Soviet Union didn't care about the workers, they oppressed the workers. Dimitri, you've been talking shit since the beginning, dude. Like, please shut up. I'm emotional because people were, like, trying to, like, put down all the numbers I was putting out and stuff, okay? And also because Andrewism literally started by saying these are, like, states like Cuba are pitiful and profiteering, when we can see that his anarchist territory, while its goals and ideals are good, materially, it's not been successful. In many ways, at least. So as we can see, the two next poorest states are the workers in the next two poorest states make a ton more than Chiapas. So, seems like Chiapas and the Zapatistas have completely failed to help the workers. But according to Andrewism, it's Cuba that is pitiful. According to Andrewism, Cuba is the pitiful state. But when you look at the numbers, when you look at the facts, when you look at the statistics, as materialist Marxists and socialists should do, we see that anarchism has not helped the people. And maybe in some ways it has. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with it, but it has failed in many ways to properly live up to the achievements of Cuba, which Cuba, I don't know about Cuba's flaws, but I'm sure Cuba has flaws. And any project has flaws. But when we actually compare data, Cuba, which was a U.S. colony, a brutalized U.S. colony, is doing better. Yes, Cuba received assistance from the Soviet Union. Cuba received a lot of assistance. That is the biggest counter to my argument, and since I'm a fair and honest person, I'll admit that's a decent counter, is that I'm the one that point out an actually good counter to my argument, that the Soviet Union did fund Cuba, did give it investments. But, I mean, when we think about how the Zapatistas did, you know, well, yeah, so yes, the Soviet Union funded Cuba, but the Cuba has existed without the Soviet Union for 30 years, over 30 years, and they've done incredible things since then. A lot of their best achievements, ecologically, gay rights and queer rights, have all come post-Soviet Union. They've held on. So, you have to read the numbers. You have to be a materialist. You can't be like Andrewism, who just makes these fancy videos with nice graphics, and he quotes a book every now and then, and he quotes, you know, and he seems very inspiring, and like he makes you feel like, oh wow, that's super cool, and wow, yeah, states all suck, they're all equally bad, and you know, anarchism is the way. But Andrewism doesn't read the numbers. He doesn't do the boring work of reading studies. He doesn't do the boring work of reading the numbers. And if he did, it would show how much anarchism fails. How much anarchism has, as of yet, failed to meaningfully change the world for the better. Doesn't matter how good of a writer you are, how fancy and idealistic you can make your ideas sound. What matters in the end is the numbers, is the facts. What did well, what didn't? Factually, statistically, numerically. Okay. If anyone wants to donate, I'd greatly appreciate it, by the way. You get a cool thing like that and all that stuff. Okay. I guess we're ready to move on with the Andrewism video. I don't think I've missed anything major. I probably did, but let me check my notes just one last time. No, I think that's it. Okay.
Because
here's what he originally said again.
Corrupt, condescending, and cruelly purposeless party politics, or regionally at the various punitive, profiteering, and pitiful post-colonial regimes that populate the Americas, or even internationally at the hegemony.
You fucking dipshit. You just do not care about the numbers, dude.
Ones past, present, and rising. I see failure. I see disaster. I see subjugation. I don't see our salvation coming from mere shifts with or seizures of state power. I've taken some time to see like a state, and all I could see was that its vision of the world is much narrower than our latent potential as a people. Through its lens and its structures, I saw no solution to our problems, only the source of them. The anarchist Alexander Berkman once said that one will become fully human when they will scorn to rule and refuse.
Does he cite any numbers? No, he cites an anarchist saying something. He cites an anarchist saying something. He doesn't cite any numbers or data or studies. He just cites an anarchist who says something cool.
To be ruled. But to understand where I and other anarchists are coming from, we'll need to settle on a definition of the state, understand the anarchist critique of it and all other forms of hierarchy, and understand all the ways the state fails both society and nature, so that we can let go of statist inevitability and realize the freedom and power.
Cuba is one of the best countries on earth for the environment. Cuba, the Soviet Union, especially in the early years, was the world leader for the environment. The Soviet Union was the world leader in terms of protecting the environment. And then also, late on in the Soviet Union as well. Oh, shoot. Okay, well, you can read this article. Late on in the Soviet Union as well, in Perestroika, the Soviet Union was also heavily following the 1950s under Khrushchev, there was a lot of environmental pollution, but after that, the Soviet Union was more and more over the years becoming very protective of the environment. And so states do not have to be polluting of the environment. Cuba is proof of that. China, I have many criticisms of China. They have incredibly reduced their emissions with billions of people. They have reduced their emissions incredibly, right? They're not doing enough, but they've done a ton to fight climate change. I think I read that they, China, from what I remember reading, how would I put this? China emissions. Yes, China emissions exceed all developed nations, but China is the largest industrialized country in the world by far, and they have done a ton to reduce their emissions. Okay, so look at this disgusting article. Global emissions set to peak in 2024. It's not thanks to EVs and clean energy. It's thanks to China. Let's go down. China. There it is. There it is. You finally get to it. It's pretty far. No country is installing more renewables or adopting more EVs than China and its massive markets. As just one example, China produced 90% of the world's solar panels in 2023. China produced 90%. It is still the world's largest consumer of coal, and this is a failure. And I think if the Soviet Union was around, it would be doing this faster. It would be turning to the environment way faster because China is very, it's captured in a lot of ways by capitalists, but not nearly as much as anywhere else. So yeah, China already peaked its carbon emissions, and it's going to meet its pledge of reducing emissions. So states can actually save the environment. They actually can. They actually can. So let's see. Does Andrewism cite a boring article on the page to support his point?
Of all the people. First, we must define the state itself.
Maybe later.
As with many of our most politically charged and sociologically potent words, the definition of the state has no academic consensus. Its meaning changes from theory to theory. So in discussions of the state, it's important to clarify which regulate.
This is boring. He just goes on and on about what a state is. It's
identifies which involves eliminating until these other and extortion rappers. States cannot sustain themselves on just these three activities. The following four are just as essential, especially as states grow in scale.
This is where I stopped.
Extraction, which involves acquiring the means to carry out the first three activities, which can include taxation, conscription, policing, and other means, because the state cannot uphold itself otherwise. 5. Adjudication, which is when the state steps in as the authoritative settler of disputes among members of the population. 6. Distribution, which involves direct or indirect intervention in the allocation of goods among members of the population. And finally, production, which refers to the state's control over the creation and transformation of goods and services produced by the population. I find Tilly's essential minimal activities useful in analysing the state's role in human society. So later on, we'll be reviewing how each of these harms us. Another understanding of the state comes from Marxists, who do all fully agree with the conception of the state, but do typically regard it as the mere instrument of class rule, where under capitalism, the capitalist class expresses its interest politically through the state. Thus, nearly every variety of Marxism pursues an inversion of this dictatorship of the bourgeoisie through a dictatorship of the proletariat. Also called the Republic of Labour or the workers' state, this dictatorship claims to deprive the capitalist class of political power and
I've never heard Republic of Labour before. It's interesting. I've never heard that.
Represent proletarian interests to resolve the class struggle inherent in the capitalist mode of production and socialize the means of production. I am not a Marxist, but I recognize that in discussions between Marxists and anarchists, the term state is being used in different ways. Marxists see the state as an instrument of political power that can be wielded by anybody, while anarchists see it as a hierarchical institution that
I think that's
antithetical to our ends and thus not.
I think that's a fair definition
among our tool set of means. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. I first need to introduce an anarchist definition of the state. The anarchist Errico Malatesta wrote that anarchists, including himself, have used the word state and still do to mean the sum total of the political, legislative, judiciary, military.
We know what a state is to an anarchist. A state is a state. We don't need these definitions.
Origins of the state. Not as arising through social contract and the consent of the governed, as some liberals believe, but as arising through its predation on the people. If you really want an in-depth exploration of state formation, you should read Against the Grain by James C. Scott and Worship in Power by Peter Gelderloos. But I'll keep this brief and summarize just the core ideas they present in their work.
So it's cool that you can read anthropologist, anarchist definitions of the state and all that Andrewism, but what it comes down into in the end is reading studies about socialist state performance, reading studies and articles and interviews about anarchist performance. You have to compare these things because your goal is to convince us that the anarchist goal is way better than the socialist state goal. I just did an in-depth numerical analysis of the Zapatistas to the Cuba, and the Zapatistas came out worse, way worse in a lot of ways. So we need numbers, Andrewism. We don't need books about guys who are going like, the state is bad, man, the state is bad. It came from feudalism, man. Yes, the state was made not out of good intentions, pretty much. What about the present, anarchism, or Andrewism? What about the present? The present. What about the past 100 years when Marxist states came to be? When the Marxism states were tried? How did they do? Compare the numbers.
Most of human history, people have lived in so-called stateless societies, characterized by a lack of concentrated authority and the absence of large inequalities in economic and political power. In fact, only relatively recently have states almost completely displaced alternative forms of political organization among societies across the planet. 2 points to note though. For one, the predominance of stateless societies does not imply the predominance of egalitarian or even anarchic societies. There's a lot we just don't know about our prehistory, but we do know that not every stateless society is inherently anarchist, because there's more to anarchism than the absence of a state.
Okay, so he defines anarchism as purely hierarchical. There has to be no hierarchy, or you don't have anarchism. And this is why he wouldn't call the Zapatistas anarchism, because there's still, like, some hierarchy. It's like... Oh man, it's just idealism. It's just idealism par excellence. It's just like... Not only can you not have a state, but you can't even have any hierarchy. I just feel defeated. I feel like it's so obvious why these anarchists are wrong. You know, and it's just like they don't care. They just, I don't know. Okay.
Many of them had hierarchies. For two, British anthropologist Tim Ingold and I agree when he says that, quote, "It is not enough to observe, in a now rather dated anthropological idiom, that hunter-gatherers live in stateless societies, as though their social lives were somehow lacking or unfinished, waiting to be completed by the evolutionary development of a state apparatus. Rather, the principle of their sociality, as Pierre Clastres has put it, is fundamentally against the state. The first states were created in Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, China, Mesoamerica, and the Andes. As Gelderloos observes in Worship and Power, primary state formation, where a society with no knowledge of existing states forms a state on its own, is
By the way, let's go back.
The first states were created.
So all of these states here, you have like the Chinese, I forget what they're called, the dynasty. You have like the Sumers here, I believe. You have the Incas here. All of these states, when they came to power, especially like the Incas in China, made huge innovations. I mean, they created paper, literacy. They created all of these incredible inventions. If you just look up like Inca inventions and stuff, the Inca Empire was crazy. Like the kind of things they invented. The Aztecs fucking sucked. I mean, they were evil. They literally just sacrificed people. They were horrific. But I mean, not to say that the Incas or China or wherever didn't also do awful things. They weren't socialist states, you know. But yeah. Yeah, China invented the first guns. They invent good and bad things. States can do good and bad things, Andrewism. They don't just do bad things. You said states only cause misery, or capitalist states. No, they don't, Andrewism. That's not how reality works. Reality is more complex than that. I'm just responding to what Andrewism said, which is that capitalism and capitalist states only cause misery. No states only cause misery. They do good things. They make paper. They do bad things. They make gunpowder. They do good things. They make the wheel. They do bad things. They make genocide. I mean, I feel like pre-states there were also basically genocides. There's evidence of that, of mass killings in hunter-gathering societies. Mass killings of, I think, hundreds of bodies were found. Aztec slander, yeah, maybe the Aztecs were not as bad, but I mean, any society that literally does human sacrifice is not very cool to me. But I don't know. But yeah, they do good and bad things. And America invented monster truck tractor pulls. Yeah, so that's a bad thing also. Yeah, states invented hospitals. They invented literacy. States gave people the ability to write books, to make music, to, do these complex paintings. Yeah, you could fucking play your little drum, boom, 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 and you could, draw on a cave painting as a hunter-gatherer. But that's not, it's not very interesting or fun, I'd rather play Fallout New Vegas. You get my point.
Created in Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, China, Mesoamerica, and the Andes. As Galileo observes in Worship and Power, primary state formation, where a society with no knowledge of existing states forms a state on its own, is exceedingly rare in world history. State formation, Mesopotamia,
It's
India,
not exceedingly rare in human history, though. It happened 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Independently. I wouldn't say that's exceedingly rare. And these states went on to do incredible things. I don't know, did the Aztec Empire do cool stuff too, I guess? Let's see. Oh, okay. Well, we can just go to the Inca Empire. They use conquest and peaceful assimilation. Yeah, monumental architecture, extensive road network, textiles, record keeping, agricultural innovations. They had no money or markets. I think this is why people call the Inca Empire communist. It was very interesting. Very, very interesting. And then you also had China. I forget what the original dynasty was. And then you had the Sumer, who also had many innovations that didn't exist beforehand. Do we have innovations? Culture. And so here's an example of how states are not necessarily bigoted either. Like here we had the Sumer dynasty. They had very relaxed attitudes towards sex. Sodomy wasn't outlawed. Sumerian writing, creating pieces of literature. This stuff didn't exist before the state. It's very cool. So yeah.
China, Mesoamerica, and the Andes. As Galileo observes in Worship and Power, primary state formation, where a society with no knowledge of existing states forms a state on its own, is exceedingly rare in world history.
It happened 6 times. I feel like that's not exceedingly rare. I feel like that's at least somewhat common, you know? It's getting pretty dark. Let me see if that makes it better. Not really.
Secondary state formation is far more common, where society develops a state influenced or aided by an already existing state. Further influence by factors is far more common, where society develops a state influenced or aided by an already existing state. Further influence by factors ranging from religion, to culture, to military, to geography. Really and truly though, as Galus is sure to emphasize, there is no tidy theory of the origin of states. Theories of state formation are not easily generalized, nor can the broad patterns that have characterized the various actual histories of state formation fit neatly within any doctrine. But again and again, regardless of the specifics, we see that early elites, be they patriarchs, clan leaders, priests, wealthy raiders, or rich farmers, created states to serve their interests, expand their wealth, and extend their power over others' labor.
They also use the state to create literacy, to create all of these inventions that actually did improve people's lives. And these 6 times are only initial state formation. Well, that's his point, that initial state formation is exceedingly rare. That, you know, fine. Granted that it, let's grant that it's exceedingly rare. I think 6 times is not exceedingly rare, but you know, there was a. What? I'm not going to try too hard to defend these states, these early states, because there were a lot of bad things to all of them, I'm sure. So I'm not going to try to just like go hard in defending them. But that's because they were feudal slave states, right? Marxists looked at the state and they said, we can do this better. We can actually make a state for the people. And they proved that. They proved that with states like Cuba, which are not perfect, but in comparison to an anarchist attempt like the Zapatistas under world capitalism, have accomplished far more. And I can always fall back on that, because no matter how much Andrewism can wax about how awful states are and how wonderful anarchism can be, where's the example, dude? Where's the example that can match the achievements of the Soviet Union or China or Cuba? Where are your examples? You had like the Spanish Civil War that lasted like a year, so we don't have any economic data or anything because it didn't last long enough to actually tell us what it was like in a very accurate way, right? It just simply did not last long enough for there to be data about it. But we have data about the Zapatistas. We have lots of data about the Zapatistas.
In Against the Grain, James C. Scott reached similar conclusions, with a focus on how the shift from hunter-gatherer societies to subsistence grain farming societies play a key role in state formation by serving as a basis for taxation, allowing states to exert control over the population. But don't get it twisted. While states needed settled populations to get their start, settled populations didn't need states. Scott takes the time to note that sedentism, farming, housing, irrigation, and even towns, all the things we associate with civilization, could be found in the historical record for nearly 2 millennia prior to the emergence of states. Still, they made it possible, but not certain, that a state could arise. Quote,
and is there evidence for pottery and music and literacy, like there was in the Sumer, or is there not evidence for that?
This complex represented a unique new concentration of manpower, arable land, and nutrition that, if captured, parasitized might not be too strong a word, could be made into a powerful node of political power and privilege. Scott defines stateness on a spectrum, but eventually settles on the criteria that would identify the first states forming where we can see evidence of territoriality and a specialized state apparatus.
I mean, this guy is like a blatantly, you can just see here, the guy writing this book is not neutral. He's incredibly anarchist. Captured, parasitized.
Identify the first states forming where we can see evidence of territoriality and a specialized state apparatus, particularly walls, tax collection, and officials. Essentially, where we see the development of the mechanisms needed to control the resources and labor of the population. And yet, despite its ill-intentioned origins, the state's existence has been justified, naturalized, and legitimized through various means, including simple tradition, as in it existed in the past, which continues to exist now, the divine rights of kings, aka God set his mind to run things, the social contract, as if we collectively got together and agreed to submit to rule, or have any real ability to withdraw consent within its framework, when we clearly don't, charismatic leadership, or the idea that we submit to be led by those we view as exceptionally heroic or virtuous, and finally, rational legal authority, where legitimacy comes from the belief that those in power got there in a legal manner and can justify their position through the law.
None of those are how I would justify the existence of a state. None of those are how I would justify the existence of a state. I would justify the existence of a state as, in terms of a Marxist perspective, as a dictatorship of the proletariat, whatever the heck you want to call it. Pottery was invented long before states. I don't give a shit. Okay? I don't give a shit. Look at the Zapatistas. No, I'm kidding. Thank you for that information.
Never mind the fact that, for all intents and purposes, they are the law. If it sounds like circular reasoning, it is, but it's also the reasoning Max Weber believes modern states rely on most to legitimize themselves. But should they be seen as legitimate? Should we accept the hegemony of states over all other forms of political organization? Are they truly the most effective means of managing our world?
I mean, look at the Zapatistas and how they have failed to meaningfully improve the lives of people. Yes, exactly. Classes made the state. Classes. The ruling classes. So if you have a state that aims to and tries to serve the people, not just through words, but through science, through Marxism, through all the centuries of people who have written about how to run a state that serves the people, all the ways you can do economic planning, how you can do all these different ways to organize and run a state that is actually a state that helps the people. States like Cuba. States like, in many ways, not all, the Soviet Union. States in many ways, like in even less, the China. Compare that to anarchist projects. These are not perfect projects, the socialist states. But compare that, have they proved anywhere that they can do better? No, they have not. Okay? So you don't have a leg to stand on if you can't point to. I mean, you can say, well, we can do better than socialist states, but we have comparisons of Cuba to the Zapatistas. Do I have any videos about the Hungarian uprising that was suppressed by the USSR? From what I understand, the Hungarian uprising was largely an overreaction by the Soviet state. However, there was a lot of violent elements. And also Hungary was like absolutely riddled with right-wingers. They didn't have any socialist resistance in World War II because everyone was killed. And then all of a sudden, like, there's a bunch of like socialists that want like a democratic socialist Hungary. It was a mixture of leftists and rightists and all that. And it was the revolt was very violent. But it seems like the Soviets shot first. Yeah. So not the best. I wouldn't say they handled it amazingly, but I don't know a ton about the situation.
I don't think so, and nor do any other anarchists. Anarchism is a political philosophy and practice that opposes all hierarchical power structures along with their justifying dogmas and proposes the unending pursuit of free association, self-determination, and mutual aid as the basis of our society. Our critique of the state is an extension of our critique of hierarchical power structures, or hierarchies, and the impact they have on those within them. Let me explain. Everybody has power, in the sense that everybody has the capacity to do and or to be, but that power differs from person to person. The measure of your power, the extent to which you can shape the world around you through your actions, is limited by your knowledge, your experiences, your resources, and most crucially, your position within various power structures, which shapes the interaction of individuals' powers. Hierarchical power structures give some groups or individuals within them both greater power than and power over other groups or individuals within them. Those at the top have authority, not in the sense of knowledge or expertise, but in the sense of the recognized right above others to give commands, make decisions, and enforce obedience to their will. It should be noted that the use of force or even violence alone does not entail hierarchy. Using force to pull a child out of incoming traffic does not create a hierarchy. Oppressed groups using violence to fight back against their oppressors does not automatically make them their oppressors.
Okay, so let's follow his logic, okay? So, pulling someone out of the way of a speeding car does not constitute hierarchy. Okay, so what he's basically saying, from my understanding, is that helping someone does not constitute hierarchy. Helping someone does not constitute a hierarchy. I mean, that's what it seems like. So giving someone health care, not forcing, but, taking someone to school, educating them, saying you have to go. I mean, you kind of have to go to be able to participate in society. Is that hierarchy somehow? How is hierarchy defined then? Because, so pulling someone out of the car forcefully is saving them. Okay, so saving someone from poverty, saving them from cancer with healthcare, saving them from illiteracy, is that hierarchy? When Cuba does that, is it hierarchy just because the party officials, the Marxists, said that you have to have healthcare?
Oppressors. On the other hand, kings, generals, police captains, presidents, capitalists, and other authorities often don't personally use violence at all. But thanks to their recognized position within hierarchically organized social institutions, they have the power to command others, even through violence on their behalf. The problem with hierarchy is quite straightforward. It divides society between rulers and ruled, order givers and order takers, authorities and subjects. It necessarily institutionalizes and stratifies power disparities when in reality, mere differences in ability are simply another dimension of our human diversity and mutual interdependence. You can fix cars or heal illnesses, I can write books and grow food. We remain equals because our differences do not inevitably and automatically create social stratification. Hierarchy instead means
look what he just said.
mutual interdependence.
You can fix cars and heal illnesses. Okay, so you can do that, but the state can't? But then if the state does it, it's hierarchical? Am I missing something, or is he just completely ignoring that the state can do these things? The state can heal illnesses. Cuba is famous for healing illnesses.
I can write books and grow food. We remain equals because our differences do not inevitably and automatically create social stratification.
Okay, hold on. Our differences...
We remain...
Okay, so...
equals because our differences do not inevitably and automatically create social stratification. Hierarchy, instead, is a specific form of social arrangement that reinforces itself through shared inertia.
Please tell me he's going to address this. I'm going to go insane if he doesn't, address how universal healthcare is hierarchical. It will be so dishonest and just, amazing if he doesn't... I just don't understand.
Material leverage, social conditioning, occasional violence, near total predominance as a form of social organization, and structural barriers to continuously build up the power of some and limit the power of others. This relationship between those vested with power over others and those placed under submission to that authority shapes them both. Anarchists are especially concerned with how hierarchies limit the powers that those below them have and develop. Our alienation from the practice of control over our lives and spaces causes us to lack practice in controlling our lives and spaces, which reinforces our dependence on the hierarchies that deprive us of that ability. Our powers, drives, and consciousness all reinforce each other. So when we're subject to hierarchical power structures, our perceived potential ends up limiting our actual potential.
So when the hierarchical state... Okay, guys. So when the hierarchical state teaches you to read, that's limiting your potential. That's what he says.
We're subject to hierarchical power structures.
The power structures limits our actual potential. So when the hierarchical state limits, teaches you to read, gives you healthcare against disease, that's limiting your potential. But when the Zapatistas don't teach you to read and let you get pregnant at 15, because Chiapas has the highest adolescent pregnancy rate in Mexico, that's helping you reach our actual potential. Okay, guys? We don't need... I mean... Well, what do I even say to that? It's like... It's just buzzwords. He just throws buzzwords at you. Buzzwords, buzzwords, buzzwords. Sounds so cool. Our potential's being limited. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Cuba, highest literacy rate in the Latin Americas. Chiapas, lowest literacy rate in Mexico. Do you guys see the problem here with Andrewism? 200,000 subscribers, 6,000 likes. I've never gotten 6,000 likes on a video. Man, I won't lie, I'm envious of those numbers. But it's like, it's just like, it's like, how does anarchism, how does not being able to read, and then Andrewism, of course, his only resort to this is to say it's not anarchism, right? That's what he's going to do if he would ever be faced with this. Well, the Zapatistas aren't anarchists. Okay. I mean, the Zapatistas are a lot closer to anarchism than Cuba. But you don't learn to read in the Zapatistas, many people. But you do learn to read in Cuba more than anywhere in Latin America. So, how do you... What... Man. Andrew's arguments just boil down to idealist moral platitudes. I mean, that's it. That is it. It's just idealist moral platitudes, you know. Guys, anarchism will be better, trust me. You'll reach your full potential, guys. Trust me. How dare they give me my IT degree? Yeah. It's oppressive. The Zapatistas said they aren't anarchists themselves. My dude, they are functionally anarchists in so many ways in their organizational structure. Just because they say they aren't, just because America says it protects the world and protects our freedom and democracy, that doesn't mean that they do that. You can't look at what something says. You must look at what it does. That's idealism, is what something says. Materialism is what it does, what exists in material reality. You have to adhere to material reality, okay? Didn't the Zapatistas literally get bodied by the drug cartels? Yes. I talked about this at the beginning of the stream. The Zapatistas on Chiapas is ridden with drugs and crime. And meanwhile, Cuba is the safest country in the Caribbean by far.
Our perceived potential ends up limiting our actual potential. Think of, for example, how patriarchy has historically acted to limit the drives of women and men alike to traditional gender roles and their associated aspirations so the status quo could be maintained. Think of how subordinate groups internalize their oppression, convinced of the inevitability of hierarchy, and imbued with a false consciousness that obscures the source of our exploitation. Even authorities are deprived by hierarchy. They may enjoy greater power, but they are also isolated from the experiences and perspectives of those below them. Hierarchy necessarily creates conflict between us. Rulers and ruled clash over their opposing interests. Authorities fight amongst themselves to accrue greater power, and the
Okay, wait, he added a text.
Rulers and ruled clash over their opposing interests. Authorities fight.
Yeah, I mean, this what he wrote is just the most boring, the most absolutely boring, tired, worn out, definite criticism, which is just that, oh, the proletariat becomes the new oppressors. Okay, so why did the Soviet Union uplift and improve? Why did the Soviet Union teach everyone to read? Why did the Soviet Union teach everyone to read? Why did the Soviet Union have a huge base of workers that became people? Okay, well, yeah, he says they become the rulers. Again, the Zapatistas have failed to teach people to read. Remember Michael Prenti, guys. What does Michael Prenti say? Do you know what it means to be able to read? Do you know what it means to be able to read, right? Do you know how it changes people's lives? Let's see if I can just find that clip. Oh, this is basically...
You could look at any existing socialist country, if you don't want to call them socialist, call them whatever you want. Post-capitalist, whatever. I don't care. Call them camels, window shades. Doesn't matter. As long as you know the countries we're talking about. You can look at any one of those countries, and you can evaluate them in several ways. One, comparing them to what they had before. And that, to me, is what's very compelling. That's what's so compelling about Cuba, for instance. When I was in Cuba, I was up in the Escambray, which is like the Appalachia of Cuba, very rugged mountains, people very poor if they were. And I said to this campesino, I said, do you like Fidel? And he said, sí, with all our souls. I remember his gesture, with all our souls. I said, why? And he pointed to this clinic right up there on the hill, which we had visited. He said, look at that. He said, before the revolution, we never saw a doctor. If someone was seriously ill, it would take 20 people to carry that person, because you'd go day and night. It would take 2 days to get to the hospital. First, because it was far away, and second, because you couldn't go straight. You couldn't cross the latifundio lands. The boss would kill you. So you had to go like this. And often when we got to the hospital, the person might be dead by the time we got there. Now we have this clinic up here with a full-time doctor. And today, a doctor in Cuba, when you become a doctor, you've got to spend 2 years out in the country. That's your dedication to the people. And a dentist who comes 1 day a week. And for more serious things, we're not more than 20 minutes away from a larger hospital. That's in the Escambray. He said, that's freedom. We're free today. We have more life. And I talked to a guy in Havana who says to me, before, all I used to see here in Havana, you call this drab and dull. We see it as a cleaner city. It's true. You got the paint is peeling off the walls, but you don't see kids begging in the streets anymore. And you don't see prostitutes. All we said was prostitutes. Prostitution used to be one of the biggest industries. And today, this man is going to night school. He said, I can read. I can read. Do you know what it means to be able to read? Do you know what it means to be able not to read? I remember when I gave my book to my father, I dedicated a book of mine, Power and the Powerless, to my father. I said, to my father with my love. Gave him a copy of the book. He opened it up, looked at that. He'd only gone to the 7th grade. He was a son of an immigrant, a working-class Italian. And he opens the book, and he starts looking through it, and he gets misty-eyed, very misty-eyed. And I thought it's because he was so touched that his son had dedicated a book to him. That wasn't the reason. He looked up at me and said, I can't read this, kid. I said, that's okay, Dad. Neither can the students. I mean, that's not something... I mean, don't worry about that. I wrote it for you. I mean, it's your book, and you don't have to read it. You know, it's a very complicated book, an academic book. He says, yeah, I can't read this book. And the defeat that man felt. That's what illiteracy is about. That's what the joy of literacy programs is. That's why in Nicaragua you got people walking proud now for the first time. They were animals before. They weren't allowed to read. They weren't taught to read. And that's why I support revolution. The revolution that feeds the children gets my support. Not blindly, not unqualifiedly. And the Reaganite government that tries to stop that kind of process, that tries to keep those people in poverty and illiteracy and hunger, that gets my undiluted animosity and opposition.
Cuba. What the hell even goes on over there? Few people outside the country have any idea.
My bad. But yeah, that's a beautiful clip from Michael Prenti that I think goes to my point that the revolution that feeds the people and the children gets my support. That means that Zapatista does not, that teaches the people to read gets my support. The Zapatistas did not teach the people to read. Chiapas is the least reading state in the country. So, but I'm supposed to support the Zapatistas over Cuba, which taught the children, that fed the children, that taught the people to read. So, yeah.
Fight amongst themselves to accrue greater power, and the oppressed fight among each other over limited resources and opportunities. That's not to say that conflict wouldn't exist without hierarchy, but that hierarchy enables the vast majority of the conflicts in our world today. The state, with its division between government and governed, is among the worst offenders of our humanity. From its origins to its modern manifestations, the state has never been anything other than a tool to concentrate the power to dominate.
So does he cite any sources here? Any studies? Any analyses? No, he just says it. None. The state. He just is incapable of nuance, of complexity. His brain just does not. He cannot understand complexity. The state has never been anything other than a tool to concentrate the power to dominate. He just. Oh my God. Oh yeah, the meme about Soviet scientists. Yeah, let me see if I can find that.
Расцветали яблони и груши, поплыли туманы над рекой.
But this can't be right. There seems to be a mistake. I was supposed to be a woman born into a backward family that never had a chance to attend school and got my marriage arranged by my parents.
Become an accomplished scientist!
И ходила на берег Катюша, на высокий берег.
So yeah, it's like... it's funny, you know? I released another video making fun of anarchists, but then I deleted it because I was like, oh, maybe that's a little mean. I think it was accurate, but it was a little mean. So
through the executive, legislative, and judicial.
Great video, brother. Thank you. Good voice acting, by the way. Thank you. I've considered trying to do voice acting, at least for fun.
Branches of government, the civil service bureaucracy, the prisons, the military, the police, and the education system, the state extends its domination over the masses. Just as capitalism alienates us from control over our labor, the state alienates us from control over our society. Without the separation of superiors and inferiors, we would
It's so funny that Andrewism, he doesn't want to cause like a controversy, so he doesn't even talk about the Soviet Union. He doesn't even like try to like, he doesn't even try to address socialist states. He just lumps it all in as capitalist. He doesn't even try to like, maybe in other videos he has, but like, it's funny. Guys, can we get any donations, please? I'm very poor and I need money. I'm not going to continue until someone donates money. Who wants to be my pay pig? I'm just going to stand here until someone donates money. I'm sorry about that, Cobra Commander. That sucks. But I still need money. Pay up. Thank you, Luna. Respect. I hope you're doing well too. I'm doing okay. You know, I'm trying. You know, dealing with life, but trying, and I appreciate it. $3 more and we can go on. $3 more. Come on. Come on, pay pigs. Give me $3. Give me money, Kozel. No, you can't have my real information. No, you have to give me money or I will ban you. Okay, this isn't working very well. Alright, well, fine. I got $2. I'll take that. It sucks being a socialist. Everyone else is also... I mean, I wouldn't say I'm poor, but everyone is generally poor. Alright, let's just move on.
Be able to develop the powers, drives, and consciousness necessary to recognize our mutual interdependence and cooperate to get things done as equals. By anarchist standards, states fail the societies they rule because the state's minimal activities are necessarily biased toward narrow ruling interests rather than the divergent interests of the masses. Warmaking serves the ambitions of our rulers.
It's just frustrating because, like, I'll tune into Vosh sometimes, and he's just got like $50, $100, $20, $40, 15. Like, it's insane how much money people give him. Like, it's absolutely insane. They just throw money at him. It's like, as he just like does the laziest, like, inept shit you've ever seen, and it's like actually shocking how much money he gets. But his audience is all like middle class, upper middle class liberals who are pretty well off and have like an extreme parasocial relationship with him and literally think he's like their dad or their boyfriend, etc. So it sort of makes sense.
Against their designated rivals and perpetuates violence on people and planets alike. State-making inherently concentrates rather than distributes power, even at its most democratic, because the state's power is threatened by real diversity, and it can leave no room for alternative forms of association that don't ultimately answer to itself. We should all know by now that when the state protects its internal or external allies, those are certainly not allies of ours. Extraction activities, like taxation and conscription, are just ways for the state to parasitically squeeze our resources and even our very bodies to enable its oppressive machinery. Finally, the state's involvement in adjudication, distribution, and production often biases the interests of the already privileged and powerful. What's more, the very structure of the modern state and its underlying high modernist ideology is doomed to fail us because it attempts to impose a simplified, legible order on our complex, diverse, and organic social reality.
A simplified... What the fuck does that even mean? A simplified... What the fuck does any of this mean? What does this mean? A simplified, legible order on our complex, diverse, and organic social reality. Does he think that states aren't complex? Does he think that states aren't, like, super, like, complex and like, diverse and, like, have a ton of different things going on? It's just cool sounding gobbledygook.
This isn't to say that
Thank you, Luna the Bolshevik. Are you the same Luna that just donated to me before, or are you a different Luna? Either way, thank you. But yeah, it attempts to impose a simplified, legible order on our complex, diverse, and organic social reality. Okay. It's just idealism, man. It's just idealism all the way through.
certain forms of knowledge about the world do require a narrowing of vision to study and make sense of, but that simplification in service of the state operates for its benefit first and foremost, with all the consequences that entails. That's the message I gleaned from James C. Scott's Seeing Like a State, though I've taken it a bit further than Scott himself would, as he isn't really an anarchist. As Scott observed, while the pre-modern state knew very little about its subjects, their wealth, their location, or their very identity, the modern state has managed to take exceptionally complex, illegible, and local social practices, such as land and naming customs, and create a standard grid that it could use to centrally record and monitor its territory and population. Perhaps the clearest example of the consequences of state simplification can be found in the late 18th century rise of scientific forestry in Prussia and Saxony, which would form the model for forest management worldwide. In the eyes of their respective monarchies, the forest served only as a revenue in the form of timber. The actual tree, with its vast number of possible uses, was replaced by an abstract tree, representing a volume of lumber or firewood.
Okay, so compare that with socialist states like Cuba, which are extremely good at protecting the environment. Compare that with China, which is gonna meet its pledge. Unlike every frickin' capitalist state, it's gonna meet its pledge to reduce emissions. Like, no matter how you compare it, yes, 18th century or 17th century capitalist fucking, like, monarchy states, there was, like, a king in Prussia, don't see the forest as, yeah, no shit. They were run by insane fucking scumbags. But modern states, even in capitalist states, even in freaking capitalist states, like at least some capitalist states, they at least have some element of, like, forestry management. But, like, but in Cuba, extremely good at environmental preservation. So yeah, states simplified some things, but I don't know.
Now, abstraction
But not all
is...
states. It's just he literally lumps every state into a single thing. And guess what, Andrewism? You're right, humans are complex. Guess what else is complex? States. States are extremely complex systems. You can't just lump it all into one definition of a state that always does bad. That's literally this video. It's states bad. But that's literally, he doesn't provide a lot of evidence to support his assertion. It's literally just states bad. States bad. Me no like. States bad. States bad. And then he points to things like how states first formed, you know, with not good intentions, which I think is totally fair. But how does that mean that states are just always going to be bad? It just doesn't make sense. And then again, I can just go back to compare the Zapatistas to Cuba. Who taught the children to read?
Is an inherent aspect of analysis, but the state's especially narrow focus on its financial gain omitted the various flora and fauna, the forest's cultural...
But states don't necessarily just focus on the forest for its own financial gain. States can do other things with the forest. We literally have forestry management in the US. And, you know, it's not nearly enough. It's awful. America's exploitation of it's fucking awful. It's evil. But it's not just they can do more. They can do better, and we have proof of this. We have proof of this with the Soviet Union, at least in some ways. We have proof in China. We have proof in Cuba. So, next, I guess, because this is disproven by evidence that states can care for the environment.
Significance for magic, worship, and refuge, and the surrounding society's other interactions with the forest through hunting, gathering, pasturage, fishing, charcoal making, and trapping. This omission is what laid the groundwork for what came next. Scientific forestry aimed to replace traditional forestry methods that were deemed unsatisfactory for physical planet. It began with precise measurements and calculations of timber and revenue yield, but soon ventured into creating more manageable forests by transforming diverse, old-growth forests into uniform, administratively convenient ones. The unintended side effects of this simplification included reduced biodiversity, thinner and less nutritious soils, and increased vulnerability to storms and pests. In
Yeah,
response,
all of these were bad. States damaged the environment in countless ways, horrific ways. But states can actually help the environment in various ways. They can prevent forest fires. States can put out forest fires. They can put out, and you know, it's so funny. Like, who causes forest fires most of the time? It's fucking idiots with a cigarette. You know, it's not like a state causing a forest fire. It's literally like some dumbass goes out into the woods. No fucking state involved. Some idiot goes out into the woods and accidentally sets a fire that spreads, right? That's how the state didn't. Who comes in and prevents that forest fire from spreading? The state does. Firefighters do. So he's talking about the state simplifying things. He is simplifying things. He simplifies everything. Andrewism simplifies and reduces and just compresses everything into these easy to understand things that don't correlate with reality. Yes, states can and do destroy the environment in horrific, unspeakable ways, but there's plenty of evidence that they can and do also protect the environment. Yeah, the state is a tool, not something that exists in a void to oppress. That's what I was going to point out in the video I'm making. There's no necessarily good or bad state. It's a tool. Thank you, Memer Lemur, for subscribing. And thank you, D, for the $5 for the 5 big ones. I appreciate it.
the Germans pioneered the concept of forest hygiene to try to restore ecological balance. These efforts merely worked around an impoverished habitat that still focused on single-species timber production. A monoculture may be easy to measure, manage, and understand from the top down, but it is also less
Okay, but not all states always do that.
resilient to ecological crises compared to polyculture, and thus requires continuous and harmful intervention in the form of fertilizers and pesticides to sustain its existence. The metaphorical value of this history should be clear. There are unforeseen dangers and deleterious consequences in the state's efforts to make the world more legible and manipulable from above and from the center. This effort to render the world legible in the eyes of the state extends even further than the simplification of forests. The natural world, this effort to render the world legible in the eyes of the state extends even further than the simplification of forests. The natural world, even when shaped by human activities, is still too complex for straightforward administrative manipulation. Now imagine the effect of government intervention in human societies. State agents, like scientific foresters, are not interested in accounting for or representing the entirety of social reality. Instead, their abstractions and simplifications are guided by a limited set of objectives, historically centered around taxation.
You need to limit the objectives, and you need to limit identifications for the purpose of helping people in some ways. But yes, a good state should account for as much complexity as possible, and they do. They do, because they can account for illiteracy, and they can teach people to read by using sensors to go out and understand where the literacy rates are. They have government scientists and government censors can go out and make the world legible. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to make the world legible, to simplify it to a point where you can better understand how to make the world better. And he's being so vague about, I don't know. I'm tired, man. I'm tired. It's just, he simplifies so much.
Political control, and conscription. Take, for example, the invention of permanent inherited surnames. The standardization of your name came about so that officials could identify the population for taxes, tithes, property, and conscription. English peasants in 1381 rebelled in part because of it. But statecraft carries on regardless.
Is he trying to say that last names are bad because states made them? Oh my god, dude. Maybe that's not the most generous interpretation, but like, I like having a last name. I like not just being Evan. I like having a longer name. You know? It's like, what's wrong with having a longer name? I don't know.
Formal and local economy becomes formal and multinational. Unplanned villages become planned grid cities. The commons are enclosed into neatly surveyed lots of private property, and one's default anonymity becomes a national system of identification. Just as the scientific forester doesn't quite capture the real forest in its full diversity, the state only sees the human activity of its interest through the limited approximation of documents and statistics. Modern statecraft is, in many ways, a project of internal colonization, seeking to shape and dominate a population and landscape according to its limited lens. As Scott writes, the more static, standardized, and uniform a population or social space is, the more legible it is, and the more amenable it is to the techniques of state officials. Many state activities aim at transforming the population, space, and nature under their jurisdiction into closed systems that offer no surprises and that can
The
be best
more
pursued.
amenable it is to the techniques of state officials. Okay, so does that apply to providing healthcare, to teaching people to read, to giving them housing, as all socialist states do? And also, I mean, this is just not true when it comes to simplification when you talk about the Soviet Union. The freaking Soviet Union ethnic policies, where there was like, they categorized like 130 freaking ethnicities, and they did so much complex work to protect and promote ethnic minorities and stuff. I think they simplified the original, where it was like 230 or something, but these were like, you know, like 10 people. You don't have a whole state policy for like an incredibly tiny culture. You can't do everything perfectly. And all of these minorities were protected. But they did a little bit of simplification because they were not perfect. They didn't take every single ethnicity, but they did incredible amount, and they did they put in an incredibly ambitious program to promote these hundreds of ethnicities. So they kept things pretty damn complex, and that's a lot more complex than a lot of humans see the world. Humans see Africans as Africa. They see South America as Latinos. They see Middle East as Arabs, right? Is that caused by states? I don't think so. I mean, I don't think a fucking human in America is gonna, without a state, suddenly know the 800 ethnicities of Africa. There's nothing about an absence of a state that wouldn't also cause simplifications.
And controlled. State officials can often make their categories stick and impose their simplification because the state, of all institutions, is best equipped to insist on treating people according to its schemata. Thus, categories that may have begun as the artificial inventions of cadastral surveyors, census takers, judges, or police officers can end by becoming categories that organize people's daily experience precisely because they are embedded in state-created institutions that structure that experience. The state's most tragic episodes of social engineering have occurred on the foundation of this centrally administrative ordering of nature and society, further enabled by what Scott termed a high modernist ideology. High modernism is characterized by intense confidence in progress based entirely on the expertise of bureaucrats.
So here he's, without saying it directly, here he's attacking the Soviet Union. So here he's finally going to the Soviet Union and China. The state's most tragic episodes of social engineering have occurred on the foundation
of nature and society, further enabled by what Scott termed a high modernist ideology. High modernism is characterized by intense confidence in progress based entirely on the expertise of bureaucrats and intellectuals.
No, that was not what the Soviet Union, it was not based entirely on the expertise of bureaucrats and intellectuals. They were part of the system. But the people were also involved, right? Like, it wasn't just bureaucrats and intellectuals. But yes, the bureaucrats and intellectuals should have a role in the vanguard party, because these are the people that have done the reading, who are experts, or more experts than some people in terms of political economy, in terms of organizing a state, right? You can't just have the people run the society, especially from the beginning, when they don't know how to run us. They've never read. They just don't know anything about running a society, and a lot of them don't want to. They just want to live their own lives. They don't want to become presidents or governors. Some of them. So he said the most tragic. Oh my God.
Mastery over nature and people, attempts to simplify complex environments and social dynamics, and disregard for historical, geographical, and social context. This was arguably the dominant ideology during the Cold War, emboldened by especially authoritarian forms of the state that were willing and able to use the full weight of their coercive power upon an incapacitated civil society to bring their high modernist designs into being. In Scott's conclusion, he says that what is perhaps most striking about high modernist schemes, despite their quite genuine egalitarian and often socialist impulses, is how little confidence they repose in the skills, intelligence, and experience of...
Guys. Andrewism, I'm going to be honest, man. Every single Soviet premier started as a poor person or in a poor family. Every single one. I think except Lenin. I think he was somewhat poor. I mean, somewhat well off. I think it's... but I'm not sure. But Stalin, Khrushchev, Andropov, I'm forgetting on the guy that came after him, Gorbachev. They all grew up in poverty. They were all poor. I mean, this is such a confidently and flagrantly wrong statement. I don't know what to say. I mean, this is so wrong. This is so inaccurate. So much of the Soviet bureaucracy came from ordinary people. They came from workers. So much of the government was run by people who were born in complete poverty, who were ordinary people. Yes, they became governors. I just don't know what to say. I mean, I assume... I just don't know what to say. I guess he's talking about, like, censorship and all that stuff. Which, yeah, but... Again, it's just these absolutes where it's just like, yeah, they had no confidence in the skills, intelligence, and experience of ordinary people, but that's just not true. I mean, there's plenty of evidence to the contrary of that.
ordinary people. Scott dedicated significant time in the book to documenting the failures of forced villagization in 1970s Tanzania, Soviet collectivization, and the building of the capital city, Brasilia. We won't be discussing those today. For now, we can say that in each of those cases, rigid, monocultural, and centralized designs clashed with the complexity and dynamism of real-life systems, leading to environmental degradation, social dislocation, and a loss of human agency. The state's failure of our complex and diverse human society in its...
These collectivization and industrialization programs were huge successes. They were also brutal in a lot of ways. Yes, there was resistance, there was conflict, they weren't always easy. But this industrialization created an economic base to uplift tens of millions of people. This industrialization created an economic base to give tens of millions of people better lives, to give them futures, right? So while collectivization had issues, and I want to do more reading on this, it had issues, it also had incredible benefits for tens of millions of people in terms of improving quality of life. You can't be able to build a very strong economy in an agricultural country. You need to industrialize to build a strong, healthy economy, right? You need to be able to industrialize to be able to give a lot of amenities to help people make people's lives better. You need to industrialize. You can't have forever people in farms. You can't have an agricultural-based economy. You need an industrialized economy. These industrializations, while they were sometimes hard, were also hugely beneficial for countless people. And many of the people in the collectivization were kulaks. They were landowners. They were rich people who were fucking evil. They just were. They were evil. A lot of these people. They were evil exploiters. So Andrewism is very much in line with Reagan Republicans, Cold Warrior right-wingers who just think all those kulaks and farmers, they were just normal hard-working folks, you know, normal good old capitalists, you know, when they were ruthless exploiters and they held the state hostage. And the Soviet Union and socialist states fought against the landowners. They fought against keeping these countries in agricultural hell, right? It was historically progressive, as someone says. Things were far worse before these industrializations. So Andrewism is right on point with spreading and believing the propaganda about how collectivization is always awful. You need to have an industrialized society to form the economic base needed to improve people's lives. You can't stay on an export-based agricultural economy. You need to have factories, and you need to have machinery to produce and create goods that can help people, to produce medical supplies, to produce cars, to produce all these things.
Attempts to impose a centrally legible social order is why I also believe the state cannot handle climate change, and especially more broadly, the ecological crisis. States currently fail the natural world because the state's relationship...
I mean, what do I even say in response to this? We already talked about how China is being very successful in reducing its climate emissions, and is about to is on the way to meeting its climate goals.
...with nature is extractive, not reciprocal, and inherently divorced from the granular complexity of local ecologies. We literally saw this in the rise of scientific forestry. As Gelderloos argues in The Solutions Are Already Here, the original
it's
core...
like pretty much almost like the only actual example of how states are bad he's done in this entire video is the scientific forestry thing. And we already showed why that argument is terrible, because we already showed how states can protect the environment, right? So that point isn't very valid, because states can protect the environment. Maybe he's pointed to another example of how states are bad, but he probably has. But that was the one I think that he spent the most time on. And it just doesn't hold up. It might apply to some states, but it doesn't just apply to states in general.
The cause of our global ecological crisis is the state-driven projects of colonialism, which served as the engine of industrial capitalism's expansion. Up to now, the underlying logic of that hubristic regime has enjoyed hegemony worldwide. But even if modern states were committed to the task of mitigating the climate crisis, and they certainly aren't in any meaningful way right now, they're...
Wrong. Cuba, China produced 90% of the world's solar panels, and despite still making too much coal emissions, okay, where is it? China, no country is installing more renewables or adopting more EVs than China. The country's clean energy progress has led to projections that China's emissions have peaked, and it's going to start reducing emissions. So it's going to start reducing its emissions. So if you were a Marxist Andrewism, if you were a socialist, you would be able to point to actually, states can reduce emissions, right? They can reduce emissions. It's not just like you just make these declarative statements when there's more complexity to the world. It's incredible that Andrewism tries to portray. He talks about the world being complex when it comes to states simplifying things. But Andrewism is the king of simplifying states. And this is actually a concept that I'm working on, that I'm going to share later on, that comes into something I'm working on called spectrumistics, a frame of analysis called spectrumistics that I want to share, a sort of materialist analysis of the world. And what this is called is selective spectrumistics, which is one of my favorite things of the concept I'm developing, which is that selective spectrumistics. Spectrumistics is the idea of seeing the world as complex, as diverse, seeing the world as a spectrum. Everything is on a spectrum. And Andrewism is doing selective spectrumistics. He's applying nuance and complexity to when it helps support his argument that states are bad, but when it comes to, actually applying spectrumistics or complexity to, when it comes to applying complexity to, in ways that don't help anarchists, he ignores that, right? He doesn't engage in complexity. He simplifies. He simplifies states into these objectively awful things that only cause misery. His words, capitalism, capitalist states, they only cause misery. Why are we wasting time arguing with anarchists? I mean, you're welcome to leave. That's fine. All right.
Their bureaucracy is often slow, the economic interests are obstructive, and the decision-making apparatus, whether autocratic or democratic, are ill-equipped to nimbly navigate on niche and rapidly evolving environmental challenges. In an article published by
He just completely submits to like capitalist neoliberal frameworks. He's just autocratic and democratic. Like that's just what he's literally just, Soviet Union, autocratic, capitalist West, democratic. Deleting comments? I am not deleting comments, but I have seen comments that get posted and then disappear for some reason. I'm not doing that, but yeah.
School of the Environment, English author Fred Pearce documented the reality that several high-profile initiatives to plant millions of trees promoted by governments around the world failed to accomplish even their simplest goals and grow any forests at all. In a rush to set world records and meet ambitious environmental targets, government-led tree planting projects globally have been failing. In the Philippines, where a world record of over 1 million mangrove seedlings were planted, fewer than 2% survived a decade later due to poor site selection and ecological conditions. In Turkey, President Erdogan and others planted 11 million trees across 2,000 sites, yet as many as 90% of saplings had perished a mere 2 months later. In Mexico, the World Resources Institute found that rates of forest loss were currently greater in the states that were implementing the billion-dollar government-funded environmental recovery program than the states that weren't. These government-led phantom forests.
Okay. I believe China has also done this. But I believe China's attempt has been better. And this is ignoring that there's far other ways to protect the environment as a state than just to there's far other ways to protect the environment as a state than just planting trees. He ignores so much. He ignores so many ways the state can protect the environment and the oceans everywhere to just point to this one thing. He is so anti-spectrumistic. He is so limited in just focusing on whatever supports his argument, even though it's not materialist at all. According to Foreign Affairs, which is like a right-wing regime change or magazine, the program successfully transitioned the economic model in the Gobi Desert region from harmful farming agricultural to ecological friendly tourism and forestry. Okay? That doesn't sound too bad to me. Oh my god. Fuck Andrewism, dude. This guy is just inept. So apparently in China, it has been succeeding, at least to some extent. The China planting the trees has been exceeding. And look, they changed their approach. They were making mistakes. They changed their approach. They started planting vegetation with lower water requirements. The goal is to sustain health of vegetation and choose suitable plant species. The tree programs helped mitigate climate change, and the benefit of tree planting was underestimated by previous research. It also reversed the desertification of the Gobi Desert, which is now shrinking. Okay, so all of these criticisms are outdated. Even the best one here, it says 1,700 kilometers per year, but it's actually shrinking more than 2,000 square kilometers per year. So the program is getting better in reversing desertification. Yeah, I know. The state learned from their failures and improved and adapted. The state learned from their failures and improved and adapted. So it's like, do you guys understand this? He literally pointed to tree planting by states as an example of failures. But he ignored the biggest tree planting program in the world. So is Andrewism just kind of dumb and idealist, or is he genuinely dishonest? Because I don't know how he could do this research. I don't know how he could just so happen to ignore the biggest tree planting program in the world. Maybe he mentions it. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he mentions it.
Forests, projects that claim success without ensuring long-term survival and benefits, waste resources and labor, lead to false carbon offset claims, and undermine credibility of tree planting as a mitigation strategy. To paraphrase Peter Kellerloos in The Solutions Already Here, are we actually buying more time for endangered species, threatened habitats, and vulnerable human populations? Or are we just buying more time for governments and companies to continue enriching themselves and operating the convenience of their profit margins and geopolitical strategy? Meanwhile, from Brazil to Kenya, some of the greatest efforts in reforestation and food sovereignty have been
Nope, he doesn't. He ignores China. He ignores the successes of China's Great Green Wall. The US admitted that the China is increasing forest coverage. The US admitted. So it's almost like, guys, it's almost like some states like Turkey, they mess it up. But other states don't mess it up. So it's almost like there's complexity to the world. By whose or by what metrics is the desert shrinking efforts in China measured? I mean, do you want me to go to the... They literally use satellites, my friend. They use like about the best thing you're going to get. They use satellites. The increase in forest coverage is consistent with the Chinese government data according to satellites. So, what do you guys think? Did Andrewism lie? Did he see this? Did he just so happen to miss by far the biggest example of tree planting, and he went to all of these other examples? Or what? Because I'm just speechless. I'm just completely speechless. This is a video where people are like saying their perspective on the world was changed. They see the world differently now. They're anarchists. And he is completely just misrepresenting reality. He pointed to failures of forest planning, but he ignored that even the US admits that China has been successful in reversing desertification. Okay, friends, Laurent, I don't know what you're talking about. It's more than 2,000 square kilometers, first of all, and that's per year. And you're totally missing the point. The point is that Andrewism specifically focused on failures of tree planting programs when he ignored it, that this is objectively improving. It's reducing desert. Maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it has issues, but they're reducing desert, and they're clearly doing better than all of the other tree planting programs that Andrewism pointed to dishonestly. So, yeah, I mean, it's just wild. That might be the most... I mean, there's been a lot of, like... I would call most of the video just extremely naive and misinformed. I would call most of the video just extremely naive, but this part, borderline dishonest. Maybe Andrewism happened to not see this, but I sincerely doubt that he didn't see this. I sincerely doubt he didn't see this. Because I even knew this. I knew this off the top of my head. I didn't know about other forest planning programs, but for some reason, guys, for some reason, he happened to find these failures of other states that I've never heard of these tree planting programs in the Philippines and Turkey that failed. But the one that's far the most well-known and by far the biggest and which has been successful, at least in part, he just so happened to not see. He just so happened to not include. I just don't, I don't really buy it. I don't really buy it. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think he just did not include this on purpose. Or it's either he didn't include it on purpose or he is not very good at research. I mean, he made a clear research error. So it doesn't make him look good either way.
Decentralized, grassroots, and autonomous. The best thing states can do in such cases is get out of the way. 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is protected by indigenous communities, who often lead these initiatives. Apparently, it bears repeating every time I bring them up that
Where's even the citation for that? Yeah, he just makes that claim. He does not provide a citation for that.
indigenous peoples are not inherently connected.
I'm not even saying it's wrong. I would just like to see a citation.
Land, which I covered in my video defining indigeneity. But scientists have proven that stateless indigenous socio-ecological management provides the same level of ecosystem support and protection as any. Have proven that indigenous peoples are not inherently connected to the land, which I covered in my video defining indigeneity. But scientists have proven that stateless indigenous socio-ecological management provides the same level of ecosystem support.
Okay, I assume he's citing this video as proof, but I don't think indigenous people can just organize to plant literally millions and millions of trees to fight off a desert at the scale that China has. I sincerely doubt there's an example of doing that at the scale that China has.
And protection as any imposed protected area. In an article published by Open Democracy, American climate activist Marco Lurie found that the conservation ideal of the so-called untouched wilderness mischaracterizes the carefully established relationships between communities and the lands they occupied. Historically, conservation began as an American state project of evicting indigenous communities from the biodiverse lands they cultivated. The state's project of conservation via dispossession pushes people off the land and into the lowest rungs of poverty to expand the state's supremacy over its territory. And in recent times, there's been a global intergovernmental push to reach a 30% conservation target by 2030, which threatens further displacements in the name of the environment. Still, Swedish author Andreas Malm proposes the idea of climate Leninism as a solution to the climate crisis, where we embrace a rapid, state-driven transformation of production and the organization of the economy in a situation of chronic emergency. Malm admits that he can't see how, quote, anything other than state power could accomplish the transition required, given that it will be necessary to exert coercive authority against those who want to maintain the status quo. This idea that we need to...
True.
Some sort of all-powerful state to take the reins and force needed change on behalf of the people is one I've encountered on multiple occasions. It ignores two realities. The first is that the state is a key pillar of the status quo.
Guys, I literally just talked about, for 10 minutes, about how China is literally reversing desertification in a huge state-led effort. He's just wrong. I was not expecting this video to be this bad. I watched the first few minutes. It was pretty bad. And I decided to watch it. I have not watched the rest of this, but my God, he is so dishonest. He is so myopic. He completely ignores evidence to the contrary. Or he's just a bad researcher. He might not be dishonest. He might just be very, very bad at research. I think he might have unconscious, like subconscious mechanisms which are preventing him from seeking out facts that counter his beliefs, which most people do have to some extent. So I'll be generous and say that he is subconsciously completely ignoring anything that like challenges his personal beliefs. We've seen the state improve the environment, so
And the joint efforts of governments and corporations are the cause of our ecological crisis. The state's inherent...
That's true, but they're also, in some states, fighting it. That's...
deprivation of the people's powers, drives, and consciousness is an obstacle to the sweeping changes in social ecological organization we actually need to mitigate the climate crisis and undertake true social ecological revolution. I would argue that the grassroots initiatives documented by Peter Gallalous and others have done more to contribute to transition than any state. The second reality is that even so-called revolutionary states in the Leninist legacy suppressed not just those who wish to maintain the feudal or capitalist status quo, but also the workers and peasantry who sought a model of socialist society that did not submit to Leninist ambitions. Yet Marm argues in his book, but also the workers and peasantry who sought a model of socialist society that did not submit to Lenin.
Oh my god. Alright, let's read this quote. As a historian, likes, uprisings, and other socialist parties were not consequences of the way threat. Ecology. Okay, whatever. Okay, Andrewism, but if you look at modern China, for its many flaws that I've literally criticized yesterday, so I'm not a China simp, they've planted millions of trees to fight off the Gobi government. The Gobi government. The Gobi Desert. They've planted millions of trees, and they're succeeding. And they are adapting to errors. They adapted. They didn't simplify. They adapted. In China, they take the day off work and school and go plant trees. Yeah, it's responsible to call for disorganized, small-scale ecological projects when we're staring climate catastrophe in the face. Exactly. I mean, this is as bad and worse than I thought it was going to be. I mean, this is just idealism, ignoring facts counter to his beliefs, idealism, myopic perspectives.
Ambitions. Yet Marm argues in his book Corona, Climate, Chronic Emergency that we should adopt a climate response similar to war communism, which was a set of policies deemed necessary by the Bolshevik leadership to win the Russian Civil War. Those policies included the forced requisition of grain from...
Oh my god, I was just talking about idealism, and Andrewism is going right back into it. He's going right back into it. The Bolsheviks were in a cataclysmic civil war against a fucking insane, genociding opposition in the whites who were supported by other invading armies to destroy the Bolshevik government. Yeah, they did forced grain requisitions. Yes, good. They had to survive somehow. If they had not done these things, the white government would have destroyed the Bolsheviks. They took certain unsavory actions for the long term. They took some unsavory actions so that they could do good as well. Good. I'm glad they did the requisition of grain from the peasantry. I'm fucking glad. Because guess what? After they won the Russian Civil War, they hugely uplifted and improved the lives of millions of Russian peasants. After they won the Civil War with war communism, they actually improved countless people's lives. You are a fucking idealist dumbass who doesn't understand that there sometimes has to be certain moral compromises in the long term, because we exist in material reality. We understand that the Bolsheviks did not just confiscate grain because they hated the peasants. There was a material situation which necessitated grain confiscation to help the war effort against a far greater evil. I'm really unimpressed by this video. I'm really unimpressed. I'm kind of sad. I thought, I thought there would be more of like something more impressive because I've never watched an Andrewism video all the way through. I've watched a couple partially through. And I've never really watched it critically like this, you know, like actually trying to think about what he's saying.
From the peasantry, which contributed to the Russian famine of 1921 to 22, one-man management in urban workplaces, shutting down any experiment in direct worker control, and an unchecked campaign of terror by the secret police against military deserters and political dissidents, including socialists. Malm claims that we shouldn't replicate all the horrors of war communism, but that we should take inspiration from that level of state mobilization. The specifics of Malm's vision involve seizing,
which involved winning the Russian Civil War and proceeding to make themselves the second greatest world superpower, which did countless good and uplifted the lives of millions of people. Andrewism. Oh my god. I genuinely wanted to be challenged. I do like to be challenged. This anarchist wanted to debate me a while ago. And his name is Et Veritas Caritas or something. He's got like 20k subs or something. And I didn't feel ready to debate him, and another person advised me not to, so I didn't. But I feel ready to debate now. Like, if any anarchist wants to, like, you know, discuss these things, whatever, I am so eager. I am so ready. I feel so much more ready than I used to. Challenge me, please. Because all of this is just anti-materialist. None of this is, like, trying to actually be materialist or be honest.
In the state to defeat the big bad fossil capital through major rollouts of renewable energy and carbon capture technologies, as well as climate-friendly legislation, including mandatory global veganism. He doesn't bother to engage with degrowth or social ecology in the book at all, not even in passing, and his brief and denigrating engagement with anarchism is laughably ignorant. All in all, Malm's urgent proposal seems to place a lot of stock in the alleged efficiency of Lenin's top-down central planning, while trying to wash his hands clean of its excesses. In doing so, he ignores both the specific dysfunctions of that historic model, including its consequent environmental pollution, and the inherent structural issues we found in seeing like a state. Past and present states, revolutionary or
he doesn't cite anything, he just shows a picture of Chernobyl, like, ugh.
And the inherent structural issues we found in seeing like a state. Past and present states,
because if you were to actually cite things about Soviet environmental policy, if you were to cite actual studies, there's plenty of studies and evidence that shows that the Soviet Union did in many ways try to protect the environment in the 60s and especially in the 1920s in perestroika. Yeah. And again, he lied about the forest. He lied, or he was seriously inaccurate when it talks about forest planting and how much trees have actually been planted by China and that have actually worked to help stop the Gobi Desert. Yeah, and of course he also portrays the peasantry as like all of these socialists, these ideological socialists who just want fucking like Marxism. That's not how the peasantry works. That's not how the fucking peasantry works, dude. The peasantry is filled with a diverse... Again, he's simplifying. He's fucking simplifying. He's doing the same thing that he accuses states of doing. He simplifies the peasantry or the common person into this like guy that just wants socialism. That's not what the peasantry was or is. That's not how that works.
Environmental pollution, and the inherent structural issues we found in seeing like a state. Past and present states, revolutionary or otherwise, simply do not have a good track record, either with the environment or with the people. The state is not a potential... Simply do not have a good track record, either with the environment or with the people.
Does he cite a single study? Or... No, he just talks about forestry management. That's like his one specific, or his most specific argument, which we completely like destroyed and debunked.
The state is not a potential vehicle for emancipation. Only we can free ourselves. In fact, to borrow the phrase from a colleague of mine, we need to recognize that the state is counter-revolutionary. I'll let the OG anarchist Pierre-Joseph Proudhon have the last word. To be governed is to be watched, inspected, spied upon, directed, law-driven, numbered.
Guys, let's talk about Proudhon, who is like a vile anti-Semite and freak.
regulated, enrolled, indoctrinated, preached at, controlled, checked, estimated, valued, censured, commanded by creatures who have neither the right, nor the wisdom, nor the virtue to do so. To be governed is to be at every operation, at every transaction, noted, registered, counted, taxed, stamped, measured, numbered, assessed, licensed, authorized, admonished, prevented, forbidden, reformed, corrected, punished. It is, under pretext of public utility, and in the name of the general interest, to be placed under contribution, drilled, fleeced, exploited, monopolized, extorted from, squeezed, hoaxed, robbed, then at the slightest resistance, the first word of complaint, to be repressed, fined, vilified, harassed, hunted down, abused, clubbed, disarmed, bound, choked, imprisoned, judged, condemned, shot, deported, sacrificed.
Hey man, why the fuck does, why are all the kids in Chiapas getting impregnated? Why are all the kids in Chiapas getting impregnated at higher rates than anywhere else in Mexico? If the anarchist Zapatistas are there. Why does Chiapas have the lowest literacy rate of any state in Mexico? If apparently states are what really oppress people. Why did hundreds of millions of people have their lives materially proven, as can be shown through extensive scientific data, that they've risen out of poverty? I mean, we all know about the famous China, how many people they lifted out of poverty. Same with the Soviet Union. Those people had that was pretty nice, not being able to read, being given a house. It's pretty nice. Being given free healthcare, pretty nice. A lot of pretty nice stuff. But hey, there's a weird fucking anti-Semite freak who wrote some poetry about how states are bad. So we also have that. So we have all the data that shows how people's lives are improved by socialism, and we have a quote from an anti-Semitic fucking libertarian freak. I mean, it's a hard choice, I guess.
Sacrificed, sold, betrayed, and to crown all, mocked, ridiculed, derided, outraged, dishonored. That is government. That is its justice. That is its morality. So
giving people health care, giving them education, giving them housing, all these things, bad. All of that is bad. Bad. Improving living standards, bad.
in recognizing that the centrally planned social order of the state is, by nature, out of step with and unrepresentative of the essential aspects of real social and ecological functioning, thus failing both society and nature, what do anarchists propose as the alternative? In a phrase, anarchic social revolution. An ongoing and unending project of collective self-realization.
Alright, here we go. Here's his solution. Let's go.
No less than a complete transformation of our society, economy, culture, philosophy, technology, relationships, and politics. Letting go of hierarchical conditioning.
Okay, where is it, dude? Where is that? Where is that? Where has that succeeded? Where have you done that? Where have you raised the literacy rate to nearly 100%, like in the Soviet Union? Or are you just going to throw as many vague buzzwords as possible without any real backing?
Realizing the freedom and power of all the people. The pursuit of anarchy is more than the absence of authority, more than a vacuum of power. It is the pervasive presence of consciously anti-authoritarian social relations and institutions. This is not the capital R revolution we may be used to thinking of. It is not some flashy, distant event in the future in which we storm Bastille and get our comeuppance from the capitalists. It is not overnight. It is not starting from scratch. It is not about preparing to launch a civil war or coup d'etat. It's a continuous process by which we develop our own and others' consciousness.
That's a painting. Does he know that that's a Soviet painting? Painted by a Soviet fucking painter? This fucking moron? I'm pretty sure it's a Soviet painting. I might be wrong, but I don't think it is. I don't think I'm wrong. Let me see if I can find that painting. Or does he cite it? What does that say there?
Launch a civil war or coup d'etat. It's a continuous process by which
Konstantin Yuan. Yeah, he was a Soviet painter. Yeah, he was a Soviet painter. He was a pre-Soviet painter as well. But he made it in the Soviet Union. There it is. New Planet 1921. Dude, this guy is like... He is way overrated. I'm sorry. Like...
We develop our own and others' consciousness, build networks and organizations that will expand our powers, and shape our drives to seek out and defend our freedom. It involves building
It's a Soviet painting.
robust and viable alternatives to the predominance of capitalism and the state that can weather their assaults and oppose them in turn. One of the main questions asked of anarchists is that of how we defend our revolutionary gains. Now, there are a few ways we can answer that question, starting with the aforementioned clarification of how anarchists conceive of the process of revolution in the first place. That alone should make it clear that the answer for defense is not hierarchy. That would be like trying to put out fire with more fire, or fight capitalism with more capitalism. Here and now, anarchists should be developing both counter institutions worth defending, and the strategies necessary to defend them. What those specific strategies are, I really can't say.
Yeah! He can't say, everybody! He can't say! He can't say what the strategies are! And then he blames it on being YouTube. What does that mean? Like, are you just gonna violently murder everyone? That's what you can't say? He can't say, guys, but it's gonna be great. Guys, he can't say what it is, but it's gonna be great. Trust me. Trust me. He can't say, because YouTube, but it's gonna be amazing, guys. Trust me, guys. Guys, trust me. Ignore the Zapatistas, not anarchism. Ignore all those other things, not anarchism. Guys, this is gonna be amazing. I promise you. It's gonna be so good. I can't say how, but it's gonna be so good. It's gonna be so much better than everything else. Trust me, guys. Trust me. He's going to do a Macno. Yeah, it's like, what the fuck? You can't say? Are you gonna murder everyone? Like, are you gonna like, his only thing is he's gonna kill all the billionaires, and then it's like, I can't say, guys. I can't say. I can't say the specific strategies. It's incredible. I mean, this is anarchism par excellence. This video is perfect. It is a perfect manifestation of anarchism in every way. It's wonderful. I haven't heard a single thing here that I haven't heard elsewhere. I mean, there were some minorly interesting claims, or some interesting things, but most of it has just been like the typical things. I can't really say, because we're just gonna like spontaneously create it, man. Like, just people are just gonna like make anarchism, dude. And I know he talks about more about how to build it in other videos, but it's similar, just gobbledygook. It's vague, you know, stuff that he read in a book by some dude who is like, you know, unknown. And that's another thing about anarchism, is that it's deeply unpopular. I mean, it's never been a popular ideology. It's never been very popular in most places. In a couple places, yeah, like in Spain, it took hold. But it's never been very popular. Anarchism is not popular in America. I mean, if you look at the biggest YouTube channels, socialist YouTube channels, like Second Thought or Hassan, sort of. I would call Hassan a tanky. Boy is sort of tanky-ish. They're tankies. Andrewism is like the biggest anarchist YouTube channel. It's not popular. It claims to be for the people, but it's never... People don't like it. I mean, they're not convinced. They're clearly not being convinced by this stuff. By just saying, I can't say how to defend it. Some people are. But materialist people who care about, you know, facts, they're not being convinced by this stuff. They're just not. They're just not. Because a lot of people are materialist, or at least partially materialist, and anarchists cannot answer the questions they pose properly. And this video is proof. This video is proof. Nah, non-compete is cool. Non-compete is an anarchist that saw the light. I love non-compete. Because non-compete is a materialist, and he realized that anarchism was not materialist.
See, I think it's important that we trust that people in the practice of winning their freedom will, of their own volition, fight to defend that freedom. My video on social revolution offers some suggestions for tactics that can compose a particular strategy, but there really are no grand blueprints or one-size-fits-all prescriptions for dismantling different hierarchies and expanding anarchic social relations. Nor should we bind ourselves.
So when it comes to this, there's complexity. Oh, well, it's too complex, bro. I can't, there's too much complexity to it. But states, they're just objectively evil in every way. Oh, God. It's just too complex, man. There's so much complexity, man.
To mimicking what has been done before. Our strategies will vary depending on what specific opportunities for confrontation and subversion present themselves. Those opportunities are best identified by developing a continuous analysis of current conditions.
You mean like how China did a continuous analysis of current conditions when it came to protecting the Gobi Desert? You mean like the Bolsheviks did when they did war communism to protect the revolution? They did an analysis of current conditions to protect the revolution. And then once the Civil War was won, did Lenin stay with war communism? No. No, he changed it. Same with Stalin, although Stalin, I have many criticisms of Stalin, but, you know, they didn't always stay with the same method. They changed things over time, for better or for worse. So, I mean, this is what socialist states do.
Conditions so that we know when and how to act accordingly. And if anarchist projects have made enough progress that they represent a viable and independent alternative to hierarchical organizations, then I would argue that our gains would defend themselves. You see, participation in society is necessary as a consequence of our mutual interdependence. And in a society where a particular form of organization is predominant, individuals tend to adopt the values associated with that form of organization. When hierarchical forms of organization are predominant, hierarchical values are similarly predominant. As I said before, this is one of the main ways that hierarchies maintain themselves. So, if anarchic forms of organization were predominant, then anarchic values must be predominant, making it quite difficult to attempt to impose values are similarly predominant. As I said before, this is one of the main ways that hierarchies maintain themselves. So, if anarchic forms of organization were predominant, then anarchic values must be predominant, making it...
Okay, anarchic values and forms of domination are present with the Zapatistas and in Chiapas, you can impregnate children and less people can read there than anywhere else in Mexico. So we have anarchic forms of seeing the world present in places like Chiapas, and they've made a lot of, you know, they might have some admirable elements, but they also have a lot of fucked up elements and a lot of not so nice things going on, you know, completely ridden by crime and drug lords. Another thing I forgot to mention is that young people are leaving Chiapas in droves because they see no future in the anarchist project. That's something really important I should have mentioned earlier, is that young people leaving Zapatistas. Let me see. Let me see. Okay, well, I can't find... Oh, I think this might be the one that talks about this. No, this is not it. Here it is. Well, this isn't the article I'm thinking of, but... Yeah, so people they're not going into any better situations. They're going into awful situations. But the young people, the youth, are leaving. The young people are leaving the Zapatistas because it doesn't offer a future to them. And I only want to support that claim if I can find another citation, because I know I've read this. Let me see if this mentions it. Young, youth. No. Oh. I know there's an article out there that mentions this. Oh well.
It's quite difficult to attempt to impose hierarchy from scratch, because anarchism is not just the absence of hierarchy, but conscious opposition to it. The foundational principles of anarchist alternatives to the state and capitalism can be found in free association and federation. I'll be spending some more time discussing both in an upcoming video on organized anarchy. Stay tuned. In short, free association is a principle of...
I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. Said I'd be right back. Alright, let's finish this video.
social organization. It is the way we organize without hierarchy, freely coming together and apart at various points of consensus and divergence as a natural consequence of our species' mutual interdependency. We need each other to survive and pursue our interests, no matter what form of society we find ourselves in. As Kropotkin said, mutual aid is a factor of our evolution. Organizing based on free association means cooperating and problem solving on the basis of our interdependency without relying on hierarchical power structures. Federation is a principle of anarchic organization that is entirely distinct from the form of federation seen in some governments. The federative principle...
Guys, trust me, it's distinct, it's different, okay? We promise.
Decentralization of society and the dynamic process of organizing its parts into groups that may overlap, merge, split, and dissolve according to the identified interests in a mutual horizontal manner. For example, as described by anarchist Sean P. Wilbur, federation might take the form of consultative bodies that focus on gathering and disseminating knowledge for informed action. This reminds me of a concept that James C. Scott explores, which is how seeing like a state blinds you to the role of métis, a form of knowledge that would serve a critical role in anarchic organization. Métis is defined as a wide array of practical skills and acquired intelligence in responding to a constantly changing natural and human environment. Only through direct involvement and experience can we acquire métis, and that sort of contextual, particular, and practical wisdom is crucial for developing flexible and diverse social institutions. On the other hand, there's technique, or technical knowledge, which is expressed precisely in hard and fast rules, principles, and propositions that are applicable universally. Technique differs from métis quite radically in terms of how it is organized, codified, modified, and taught. 10 times 10 is always 100. Both métis and technique are valuable forms of knowledge, but Scott observed a recurrent theme in Western philosophy and science of attempting to reformulate knowledge systems to eliminate all uncertainty. Yet the practical knowledge of métis found in some traditional medicines and agricultural techniques has often preceded scientific understanding. That isn't to fetishize métis or devalue technique, but to recognize that the often disregarded former is no less valuable than the latter. The anarchist alternative of consultative bodies should involve both technique and métis knowledge to properly inform the actions of those who choose to associate with them. In The Solutions Are Already Here, Peter Gillows encourages us to move from technocratic timetables and approaches to the ecological crisis towards, quote, the networking of thousands of empowered territories, each one approaching the horizon of a complex, imagined future that prioritizes the health and happiness of that territory and its inhabitants. We need to find the seeds of those empowered territories all around us, nurture them, cultivate them, and link them in a rhizomatic web that will become stronger than any institution of the ecocidal system that has already fallen to ruin. Strong enough so that as many of our living communities as possible, human and non-human, all enmeshed, will survive the upheavals and disturbances as our planet tries to heal from centuries of abuse. I can't help but wholeheartedly agree. It's a fairly common assumption that any conscious change at an enormous scale must be done through the state. But when it comes to mitigating the ecological crisis and pursuing social revolution, change must spring from below. Whether we're building robust social networks...
Okay, so again, just completely ignoring how China has met its pledge, is on the way to meeting its pledge to reduce emissions, ignoring that, as we've discussed, plenty of evidence and examples of socialist states that can protect the environment, as we also just discussed about Cuba and the Soviet Union.
And distribute to meet people's needs, developing people's consciousness of their own power as individuals and collectives, slashing global corporations at their roots, rebuilding soil in partnership with flora, fauna, and fungi, or bringing together traditional and experimental ecological
knowledge. It'd be one thing if he said, China isn't doing enough, right? But that's not what he said, right? And this is how these anarchists do operate, is they don't operate off of nuance when it doesn't suit them. They don't operate off of nuance. They operate off of, I'm right about states and states are evil, period. If he'd been like, look, China is doing some good things, but it's clearly not doing enough, and we need to organize the only way we can meet the ecological crisis is anarchistly or whatever. I still strongly disagree with that, but at least that's a fair critique. But he set up a straw man where he ignored examples of the state meeting and fighting climate change to just say that, like, the state can't help at all, it can't do anything good. It's just a straw man. It's just dishonest. It's just dishonest.
At the niche local level, change must be led by the people themselves, not a slightly different regime. The state will not protect us. In fact, though some of us may die, that's a sacrifice it's more than willing to make. There will never be decolonization by decree. The complex and reciprocal relationships.
I mean, there kind of was, though, in the Soviet Union. Like, by definition, the Soviet Union was engaging in decolonization by decree. We can talk about Affirmative Action Empire, the book by Harvard historian Terry Martin, where he talks about how the Soviet Union was literally an empire of affirmative action. It confronted the rising tide of nationalism by systematically promoting the national consciousness of its ethnic minorities and establishing for them. So the Soviet Union literally was decolonial by decree. Its goal and objective was to show how the Soviet Union how the Soviet Union was trying to very hard, trying with lots of effort to decolonize Russia. Okay, that's funny. I'm cheering on the dude with the headphones in a Vaseline-covered universe. That's great. Vaseline-covered universe. That is good. I like that. Warhammer is pretty cool. I recently got into Warhammer. But anyways, yeah, I mean, the Soviet Union literally engaged in decolonization by decree. Like, it wasn't perfect. It made errors, but yeah.
Of the healthy forest, metaphorically and literally, cannot be imposed by the stamp and reciprocal relationships of the healthy forest, metaphorically and literally, cannot be imposed by the stamp of authority.
I mean, ignoring the criticisms, most of which are outdated or non-applicable, we see how, past all the criticism, the desert is shrinking. The desert is shrinking. China is planting trees, planting forests that are fighting off the desert, and it is a state. And it's going to meet its carbon goals. It's on the way. So, again, Andrewism has completely just set up a straw man and attacked that.
Authority. All power to all the people. Peace. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share.
Okay. All right. What do we think? What did we learn? We learned that anarchists are idealists. I think that's the most important lesson, is that they just will not actually engage with the material facts when it comes to socialist states. And they will just lump everything into one hyper-simplified conception of reality where states are just awful. I mean, that's exactly the point. No state is perfect, but that doesn't mean they're inherently bad. I mean, that's been the whole 44 minutes where Andrewism has just said, states are bad, period. They only cause misery. And I've pointed to countless examples where states have done incredible things. In Cuba, in the Soviet Union, in China, where states have done incredible things to help the people. But Andrewism does not reckon with any of that. He doesn't reckon with any of that. He ignores all of that. The only thing he talks about is he talks about war communism in the Soviet Union, which was completely justified in the material circumstances. But he doesn't reckon with that. He doesn't address the material conditions because he doesn't care about the material conditions. Once I finished my history degree, I became a Marxist. I mean, of course. Same with non-compete. the YouTuber Non-Compete, he started reading books that weren't just anarchist, screeds. He started reading non-anarchist works. He started reading history. And if you actually go to his channel, he's extremely well-read. He's one of the most well-read people on YouTube, I'd argue. He's very well-read. He's deeply studied this stuff in a materialist way. He's not like Andrewism, where Andrewism just finds 800 books on anarchism, and that's the only thing he reads. And it really does seem like that's like the only thing he reads. Maybe he read that Andreas Malm book, Climate Leninism. Maybe he just read critiques of it. I don't know. But it seems like he's very uncurious, as can be seen how he just completely ignored the example of China when it comes to tree planting, and he pointed to other tree planting. Yeah. So he has a part 2, Organizing Anarchy. Would you guys want me to suffer through that part 2? That one would probably be less interesting, because it's probably going to just be like, just not that interesting. I mean, it's just going to be a bunch of hypotheticals, how anarchy could work. I don't know if that would be very interesting to watch, but yeah, I mean, that was very bad. Oh yeah, that's 53 minutes. I don't know if I want to watch that. I mean, it would be kind of fair to give him a shot, It'd be fair to be like, okay, what has he got? What is he actually going to offer? But we already talked about how so many things contradict his arguments that he made in this video. We've already shown so many things, so I feel like, I don't know, but maybe if people are interested, we could do a part 2 and watch the second half as well. Yeah, I think maybe I will do a part 2, maybe tomorrow, because that was very fun. I had fun. I did not expect that video to get as much of a rise out of me as it did, and I loved that. 2 minutes into the video, I spent like talking for 30 minutes. I think it just shows, how historically illiterate anarchists are in many ways. And how once you actually study history, once you get history degrees, once you non-compete, you start diversifying the things you read, you see that things are not as simple as they seem. By the way, if anyone wants to donate, I would much appreciate that. Y'all just got 3 hours of free content, okay? But, I'm sorry, it's authoritarian to ask for money, so can't do that. No, I mean, that's a straw man of Andrewism's arguments, but yeah. Whew. What else does he have here? What else does he have here? Yeah. That's another Soviet painting. But I guess maybe he's saying that's a dystopia, so. It's just so much of it is so vague. At least here he talks about the Britain destroying the Caribbean. That's good, but so much of it is just, it's just so vague. The VOD is going up. The full VOD is going up. You'll be able to watch the whole thing. You should be able to rewind the current thing as well. Who's your favorite not explicitly socialist-oriented left-tuber? I mean, that's a good question. That's a very good question. I think there's lots of good ones. I think Boy has never called themselves socialists, and they just released an incredible video. An incredible video of actual journalism. This video is incredible. I almost wanted to watch it on stream. I didn't finish it, but just what it did so far, talking about Steven Donziger. Yeah, Boy is amazing most of the time. Who else? Not explicitly socialist. I don't know. I can't really think of anyone else. I'm subscribed to so many people. Not all of these people I'm subscribed to I like, by the way. Just because I'm subscribed to someone doesn't mean I like them. Oh, there we go. There we go. That's honestly, that's my favorite YouTuber, let's be honest. That guy's my favorite. Of course. Oh god, he's live. He's live right now.
Between Palestinians and Israelis. Kfar Aza on October 7th was the site of what an Israeli general called a massacre. And I don't know what's happened to that father of four. But I can tell you this, folks on both sides of that fence deserve to have a future, one that's free of this cycle of violence. It's time for us to reach the
Senate race. Okay. Yeah, I've talked about how Vosh did a sort of slight more leftist turn lately. Dead Domain, what is that? Yeah, I've never heard of them. They do good thumbnails though. They make very nice thumbnails. I love their thumbnails. Yeah, so many people, these people I'm subscribed to, I don't ever watch. Obviously, no one could watch all of these. I don't even watch much YouTube at all, honestly. Main YouTube I watch is just like Boy and like fucking like some Second Thought, like Hakeem, and then like just Gabrielle Rockhill lectures or other people doing lectures like. Second Thought's really good, though. Oh, and I like One Dime. I listen to One Dime's podcast. He has weird-ass people on, though, One Dime. But it's interesting. He has... He challenges some of my perceptions sometimes. I haven't watched too much of this girl's stuff, but she seems pretty good from what I've seen. Jonas Saika, the fucking left comm. But he still has some good videos. Jonas Saika's video actually on urban guerrillas is really fucking good. I love this video. But yeah, he's kind of a left commie sort of guy, I think. But not that bad. I like the leftist cooks. Cosmonaut is really good. Their podcast is really good. Their magazine and all that. Lost Futures is kind of cool. Damon Sultan. So this guy was the runner of the United Marxist Pact, the Discord channel, and that was the channel that I kind of first went into when I was first learning about, like, I was becoming more radicalized, and this Discord kind of helped me in a lot of ways. And he's very nice. Uyghur Pulse. Oh my god. That's fucking hilarious. I don't even know why I'm subscribed to that. Oh, my favorite YouTuber that isn't call himself socialist pretty much is FD Signifier. I actually really like FD Signifier. I almost made FD Signifier a tanky with my tankies video. And then Andrewism was the one that came in and like shat on my video and kind of like, and now FD Signifier is more on an anarchist path. So yeah, sucks, but whatever. Stellar Politics. It's cool. So much garbage. Jesus Christ. Who is this guy? Poland Zoc. He's pretty based. That's all I can say. Diallo Kenyatta. Yeah, it's sad. So many of these channels are dead. So many of them just kind of die out. Task and Purpose. This channel's fucking disgusting. I need to make a video about this channel. This guy is just a complete... Oh my god, it's so bad. Oh, this guy's cool. He just talks about old Soviet video games.
Periscope in 1960. The Soviet.
Yeah, I need to. Maybe I'll watch one of his videos on stream to just relax another day. Not tonight, but maybe another time. Dan Simpson. I don't know who all these people are. Fred is pretty good. I don't know if he calls himself a socialist, but Fred is pretty good. Oh, Kay and Skittles is very good. They don't really call themselves a socialist. I love... Left on Replay is a Marxism Today. I love Marxism Today. Even though he's a Maoist. Pillow Guy Productions. I don't really remember this guy, but maybe he's cool. Seems cool. FD Signifier is cool. Non-Compete is cool, and their live streams are good. Space Baby is a Maoist, like Marxism Today. Halim Alra was really cool, but he stopped making videos. Sadly, he had really great production value and all that,
How
but he stopped
particular
years
group
ago.
constitute the
So that sucks. Oh shit, he was parenti-pilled. Dude, that sucks that he stopped. That's a true loss, is that Halim Alra isn't making videos anymore. That's a true loss. Yeah, Democratic Marxist. Midwestern Marx. Oh.
Laughed. I knew who shared it immediately. I believe I commented. I know for a fact that Carlos posted this. 'Cause this was shocking because, you know, anybody who, at least anybody who's
Yeah, not a big fan of Midwestern Marx for deciding to side with Jackson Hinkle and all that. I mean, Jackson Hinkle is the most obvious reactionary right-winger alive. Daniel Torres is cool, I think. Professor Flowers was cool. That was the person that Vosh and his audience horrifically harassed endlessly. Think that through is good. Hegel on his head is the GOAT, dude. I love Hegel on his head. He is one of my favorite frickin' dudes. He makes these dry-ass videos with lots of, like, citations and shit. Subscribe to Hegel on his head. If you subscribe to anyone, subscribe to Hegel on his head and watch In Defense of the Soviet Union and watch On Authoritarian Socialism. Watch all of his videos. Subscribe to Hegel on his head. I'll put his link in the chat. Hegel on his head is like, yeah, very good about citations. Better than I am. A lot better than I am. Politsturm is kind of weird in some ways, but GDF is like weird as fuck. He makes really good videos, but also he's obsessed with Jews in Israel, and he's probably kind of an anti-Semite, so not great. But he also does good stuff, so I don't know. Our Changing Climate is like a total fucking Leninist. Like, he's a total fucking, even though he doesn't say it, he's a complete like fucking full-on Soviet Union guy. Pretty sure. Nathan Rich actually has some good videos about China. He's actually pretty damn good. Foreign Man in a Foreign Land's pretty good. Yugopnik is cool. He followed me on Patreon. He didn't subscribe to my Patreon, but he just followed me on Patreon. So, One Dime is good. Did I watch this? I think I did. Yeah. His videos on the Cultural Revolution, masterpiece. Highly recommend watching his videos on the Cultural Revolution. Let's see. What the heck? Okay, never mind. Geopolitical Economy Report is run by Ben Norton. Ben Norton, you know, he can be a little bit uncritical of socialist states, but he's also really fucking good in terms of, like, actually understanding global politics and stuff. He's really fucking good at that. Mexi's really good. She's really actually good. She's a total Leninist. And a good person. Zizi sucks. Fucks Zizi. Not totally fucks Zizi, but Zizi's a true left comm. Epoch philosophy is pretty good. Climate Town is really damn good. Climate Town's really damn good. Tom Nicholas is great. He's another one of my favorite YouTubers that doesn't call himself a socialist. He's way up there. He's really great. Sean, he blocked me on Twitter, but Sean's very good. Sean's video on Japan nuking, America dropping the nukes on Japan is a classic. Dropping the bombs. It's a classic video. Gravel Institute was good, but then it collapsed. It doesn't make videos anymore. Pretty lame. Hatton Shea Films is really good. Oh, that's it. Okay, let me start at the beginning because I skipped over a bunch. Bad Empanada. Oh, was Mexi an anarchist? That's based. She grew out of anarchism. It's awesome. Bad Empanada. He's a disgusting Yacubian. That's all I'm gonna say about Bad Empanada. He's a complete Yacubian. Critical Theory Workshop. This is where I see all the lectures from Gabriel Rockhill. Not all of them. There's a bunch of others on the internet, but yeah, there's a bunch of really great stuff in here from Gabriel Rockhill. And he's also uploaded my compilations, which is cool. But yeah, he's my favorite dude. I just listen to Gabriel Rockhill all the time. Hakeem is good. He recently released a video on liberalism, which is very good. Boy Boy is one of the best. Deprogram Podcast is great. I listen to that a lot. If you want them to invite me on, please ask, because I would love to go on. That'd be like a dream to go on the Deprogram. I've always wanted to do that. So yeah, if you want me to go on, mention it in the Discord, I guess, the Deprogram Discord or whatever. But yeah, that would be awesome to be on there. The East is a podcast, also very good. Marxist Project, very great channel, very underrated channel. Black Red Guard, he's a Maoist. He's a hardcore Maoist, and I disagree with some things, but I think he's also accurate on a lot of things. Bestie Marks, one of the best channels out there. Fantastic channel. Fantastic channel. Highly recommend Bestie Marks. His Nazism videos are fucking amazing. His video on Turkey is amazing. His video on the German Revolution, he's great. Noah Samson is good. He's a tanky, even though he doesn't say he is. He's a hardcore tanky. He's also very handsome. Marxism Today. Maoist. Very good channel. Fellow Traveler. He helped get me into leftist politics. Pretty cool. Democracy Now! Is good. Non-compete is fantastic. Highly recommend non-compete. We were close to sort of collabing a couple times, but we never have. Balkan Odyssey, I collabed with him on this video. Communism Saved Eastern Europe. He's a fantastic channel. He's also a very, very kind, good-hearted guy. He's a really nice guy. He supported me in some ways when I was going through a rough time. I still sort of am going through a rough time, but he was supportive of me. Bad Empanada. Disgusting Yakubian. I'm actually making a video about a Bad Empanada, so. Jaime. Indian Global Left has good interviews with people like Gabriel Rockhill. Joseph Ryan Banks is a new channel, but he has some good stuff. He's cool. Yeah, I like to support the small creators. Oh my god, where's my YouTube stream? Oh my god, okay. Hegel on his head again. See if I can drop it in here. Oh my god. Oh my god, where's my... Okay, there you go. I think I've gone over everyone, or most everyone. More Perfect Union is like super lib. They advocate for voting for like Kamala Harris and shit. Flea Market Socialist. Oh, this guy just makes funny memes. Makes some good memes. Socialism for All. Pretty good. I disagree with him on stuff, but he helped radicalize me. Second Thought, one of the best channels out there. Extremely good. Daniel Tutt's good. Real Progressives. Minpress News is really good. Novara Media is not... Actually kind of fuck Novara Media. Hassan is pretty good. That Dang Dad, I think he's kind of lived up a little bit, but I think he does good stuff. I haven't really listened to this much, but it's pretty good. Jason and Pascal. Lady Izdahar is great. She has a really unique angle where she focuses on like, she focuses on like Soviet fashion and stuff. So she's really great because she has such a unique. Oh, she did a review of Atomic Heart. That's awesome. I'm doing a review of Atomic Heart. She probably is negative about it, but I want to see that. Yeah, she's based. I love Izdahar.
So, I just...
A dude? Oh yeah, this guy just posts endless TikToks. Respect. First Thought is like a spin-off from Second Thought. They're very good. Sort of like Ben Norton-esque. Ron Placone does some good interviews. Fuck Kyrgyzstat. Do not watch Kyrgyzstat. They're literally funded by billionaires. Yeah, I have Sabi. I don't really watch any of her stuff, but she seems cool, I guess. I haven't really watched any of her stuff though. Finnish Bolshevik. I watched Finnish Bolshevik a lot. When I was first being radicalized. I think he goes too hardcore, like hardcore apologia sometimes. But he also is very well read. Anti-Empire Project. Yeah, I don't... Oh, okay. Yeah, they talk about, like, Palestine every day. Means TV is cool. They're trying to build, like, an alternative platform outside of YouTube. So that's cool. Support Means TV, because they need support. They need to, they could use support. They have their own streaming platform and stuff. This podcast is really good. Has a lot of really good stuff. Highly recommend this podcast. Very valuable. This is a funny channel. This guy's great. Not socialist or anything, but very heartwarming. Taking care of animals and stuff. I love that stuff. Democracy at Work. Oh yeah, this is like run by Richard Wolff. You know, Richard Wolff isn't perfect, but he's kind of a tanky. He's kind of a Soviet Union defender. Richard Wolff is cool. He's probably the most prominent academic, like, Soviet defender, even though if he doesn't defend Soviet Union much. PhilosophyTube is actually pretty good. I'm going to defend PhilosophyTube and say that she actually makes some good videos. Her video on violence is very good from what I remember. She's not like ContraPoints where she's just a libbed up piece of shit. Fuck ContraPoints, but PhilosophyTube is alright. The crisis in the British healthcare system is also very good. So yeah, she's good. Prolocult's very good. Very underrated channel. Makes very long documentaries and stuff. I haven't listened to this much, but indigenous leftist perspective, so I think that's very worthwhile looking into. Yeah, I mean, sad stuff, but worth looking into. Kind of fuck Asianometry. Oh, okay, cool. This guy just uploads, like, socialist movies. Is that everyone? Oh, this is my friend, the One True Leftist. I did a podcast interview with him. So if you want to check that out, I'll link that. Even though I don't think I was, in my prime when I did that, still, support his channel. he's an in real life friend, and he's cool. He's helped me with some videos. Been very helpful for me. This guy's like a economic planning type of channel. Pretty cool. I found him from like a one-time podcast interview. He looks like a Giga Chad, but he's like a total nerd about the economy, so it's really funny. Left Laser is like a good Dutch YouTube channel. Yeah, this is just like a Russian, I guess, who's like somewhat pro-Soviet Union, I guess. Actually, I'm gonna look into more of his stuff because he might have some valuable stuff. I'm subscribed to some random anarchist. Okay. Thought Slime makes pretty good videos, so they are an anarchist. So, will I delete my stream after it's done? No. But it'll be up. This guy uploads a bunch of Prenti clips, so that's based. Oh, they made an anti-Signalis video. Hell yeah. This guy just uploads a bunch of Prenti clips. Red Pen. I don't remember this channel, but they do black shirts and reds type videos, so I approve. I think that's about everyone. I probably missed some, but Double Down News is pretty good. Oh, In Defense of Toucans is pretty good. Yeah, and then we're just getting back to who I already went over. So, yeah. So yeah, that's you saw my full subscriber list. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't planning to do that, but I hope I shared some cool people. Yeah, I think I'm gonna head out. But I hope people enjoyed the stream. If you want to donate to support me, you can now. Please do. I'd greatly appreciate even just a couple bucks. But yeah, I hope the Andrewism stream was informative, and I think that I will watch the second video, Organizing Anarchy. Even though I think it's probably not going to be as funny and as just enraging as the first video, but we'll just have to see. Will I delete the stream? No, I will not. The stream will stay up. Yeah, anyone can watch it. All right, well, that's about me. So goodbye, everybody.